Part 35. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 346. Yekingzin's words can be said to have hinted very clearly. With Musian's past experience, he naturally understood the meaning of her words. If it were an ordinary person, he would have been distracted by the words of this beautiful ancestor, and even embarrassed. However, Musian did not express anything, but showed an incredible surprise on his face. Sensing Yekingzin's bright red eyes staring at him, Musian was surprised at first, and then his face quickly became a little helpless, saying, "Senior, you are joking. Although I like Sister Kingdi and Ruoxi, I don't intend to do anything to let them down casually." Musian paused and sighed, "Although what I say now may not be convincing, but I am indeed not such a casual person." These words sounded extremely sincere, and when these words fell, without Musian noticing, the last trace of coldness hidden deep in Yekingzin's eyes finally dissipated completely. Musian had had many conflicts with Yayu before. His fiancée broke off the engagement with Yayu. Ye Lingxian and Ye Qian also regarded Musian as their brother and ignored Yayu. After that, even she hated Yayu, the genius of the Ye family. If it was a coincidence, it would be too coincidental. It is likely that Musian was secretly manipulating this. But no matter what, Yayu's attitude towards Yekingzin, one of the ancestors of the Ye family, and all his actions were in front of her. At this point, it has nothing to do with Musian. It is better to say that she should thank Musian for letting her see Yayu clearly. After that, Yekingzin soon had another question in her mind. Why is Musian so close to her? And Yekingzin thought of several possibilities for this question, and the words just now were somewhat tentative. After hearing Musian's answer at this moment, Yekingzin finally no longer had any guard against Musian. At this time, Musian continued, "I will try my best to find a way to prolong your spiritual consciousness for you, I can swear on this. When there is no way, I will use the last dual cultivation plan, and everything will become natural." The charm in Yekingzin's eyes gradually faded, and she stared at Musian quietly. She suddenly chuckled, "I was just joking with you just now. Even if there is no spiritual energy from the natural furnace, with my current spiritual consciousness, there will be no problem in Zhuzhu for thousands of years." She continued, "If you have any problems in the future, you can come to the South Bank to find me. However, if you have the Qing Emperor to personally guide you in your practice, I don't think there will be any time when you need me." "Senior, you are joking. Everyone's practice attainments and understanding are different. Besides, you have been to the Heavenly Palace before. To be honest, I am quite interested in the Heavenly Palace." Yeah, you relied on the protection of a powerful spiritual consciousness in his body, and did not know how to cherish it, nor did he think about how to hold the thigh of the beautiful ancestor. But Musian would not be so stupid. If it weren't for the fact that his relationship with Yekingzin was not good enough, he would have wanted to hug Yekingzin's legs and become a dog. Yekingzin smiled faintly and nodded slightly. "If you have to say it, you are also half a member of the Ye family, and the agreement between you and me can only be realized after enlightenment. If you have any doubts in the future, you can ask me. It's okay." Musian's respectful and polite attitude at this moment is in sharp contrast to Yayu in the past, and it also makes Yekingzin, who already has a good impression of Musian, a lot gentler. "Thank you, Senior." After Musian said this, he remembered what Yekingzin had just said, and couldn't help asking, "Senior, don't you plan to live in Dexin? There is a special formation in the South Bank. If I'm there, my spiritual consciousness can also be nurtured all the time." Yekingzin's beautiful face showed a faint smile, and she explained softly. "Yezhou's Medicine King also sent down a ray of spiritual consciousness this time. I think this formation was prepared by concubine Shangyan before that." The sect master's sister again, could it be that she already knew that Yekingzin would go down to the lower world? Muzian heard this and stopped trying to persuade her to stay, saying, "If you need anything from me in the future, please let me know. Whether it is the grace of the senior giving me the heavenly questioning lock or the guidance of my two sisters, I am grateful and will go through fire and water for you. This boy is not comparable to Yeyu in terms of means and thoughts, except that he is fickle in love. If it weren't for the fact that his natural furnace has been hosting other spiritual consciousness, he could protect him for a period of time in the future, and warm my spiritual consciousness by the way." Looking at the respectful and polite young man in front of her, Ye Qingxin couldn't help but say in her heart. Evidently, she had stood up for Yeyu and targeted Muzian before, but Muzian was so generous that it was amazing. Thinking of all this, Ye Qingxin was inevitably moved. She chatted with Muzian again, and finally the fiery red figure turned into a wisp of red smoke and left Dek Sinyuan. After Muzian looked up and watched Ye Qingxin leave, he couldn't help but feel a little more melancholy and emotional. A treasure-hunting mouse is a treasure-hunting mouse. If it weren't for Yeyu, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to hug Sister Ye's jade legs. It's a pity that if I want to take a step further with her, it may not be so fast. It's a pity. If the original witch's consciousness is still in Sister Mengro's body, Ye Qingxin's consciousness can enter my Tiansheng furnace. The consciousness is born with an affinity for spiritual energy. As long as she likes the spiritual energy in the Tiansheng furnace, it will be much easier to pursue her. Muzian felt a little regretful, but the capacity of the Tiansheng furnace can only accommodate the original witch's consciousness, so there is no way, and he can only find another way later. After putting away his thoughts, Muzian glanced at the brightly lit room not far away and hesitated. He came to Dek Sinyuan tonight to comfort the sisters of the Ye family, but now he thought about it carefully. Lingxian is still angry at this moment. I'm afraid she will directly entertain him with the lock of the wild time. However, Muzian still came to Ye Lingxuan's room and knocked on the door. There was no response. After nearly an incense stick, Muzian felt helpless. He could feel that Lingxian and Qian'er were obviously in the room, but they just didn't want to see him. Of course, this was actually expected. After all, senior sister attacked her today. Qian'er was fine, but it was natural that Lingxian would be unhappy. And sometimes, you don't have to meet to comfort them. At the same time, in the brightly lit room, Ye Qian was lying on the window sill, looking at the scenery outside through the window, and the boy who was leaving Dek Sinyuan and gradually blending into the darkness. "Sister, Brother Mu is back." Ye Qian looked back at Ye Lingxian who was sitting in front of the bed. After hearing her sister's words, Ye Lingxian raised her eyes and glanced in the direction of the window. "Go back if you want to," she said lightly. In fact, if she had to say it, she was not angry with Brother Mu. The person who attacked her today was Senior Sister Lan, and Brother Mu didn't move at all from beginning to end. "Should we call Brother Mu back?" Ye Qian suddenly asked in a low voice. "You have another competition tomorrow, so you should adjust your state today." "Brother Mu is fine," Ye Lingxian said. Senior Sister's sister seems to have reached the 7th level of soul refining, and I can feel that although she doesn't have a special physique, she has an inexplicable sense of danger. "You must not be careless," she reminded her sister. When Ye Qian heard that she couldn't see her beloved Brother Mu again tonight, she couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But she also knew that the most important thing at the moment was the Ascension Conference, so she nodded gently. "I know. Then I'll go back to my room first, sister." Ye Lingxian heard this, and a faint smile appeared on her pretty face, and nodded, "Go." However, the moment Ye Qian turned around, Ye Lingxuan's face also darkened. If possible, she also wanted to see Brother Mu tonight, but even if Brother Mu came today, she would not open the door for him. After all, she was still angry now. Girls all want face. "Sister, look. There is a letter at the door." At this time, Ye Qian, who had just left the room, picked up 2 bottles of pills and the letter she had just written from the ground, and turned her head to look at Ye Lingxian. It must be what brother Mu just left behind. Do you want to take a look? Ye Qian's eyes sparkled, and her heart was full of surprise and joy. Ye Lingxuan's eyes flickered slightly, and she subconsciously moved her jade neck, as if she wanted to see what was written on the letter in Ye Qian's hand, but she finally held back when she noticed her sister's shining eyes. Maintaining the image of a cold sister, she said lightly, "Put it there, and take a look when you have time later." Seeing this, Ye Qian glanced at her sister with a calm expression again, and finally put the letter on the table, pressing it with the pill that Musian gave to her sister. Then she lowered her head and looked at the content written on the letter in her hand, and couldn't help but slightly move the corners of her mouth, outlining a sweet arc. After Ye Qian closed the door, Ye Lingxian stood up leisurely, reached out and picked up the letter on the table and took a look. "Sister Lingxian, I know you are still angry. Although I lost today, I will cheer for you later. The night is cold, remember to put on more clothes. There are some elixirs in this jade bottle that can adjust the cauldron, take care of yourself. There are about 200 or 300 words written on it, and the last name of the person who signed it is Musian." Wearing a purple long skirt, beautiful as a painting, like a young lady, Ye Lingxian looked at the letter in her hand, with joy flashing in her beautiful eyes, carefully folded the letter, and gently embraced the letter. "Brother Mu." She put the letter into the ring, leaned on the table with her head tilted, holding the jade bottle with elixirs, swinging her jade feet wrapped in small embroidered shoes, but her eyes were full of joy. That night, in a hall on the south bank, Xiao Hua slowly opened his eyes. Recalling what happened in the glazed palace today, and his sister's attitude towards that cultivator, Xiao Hua's heart was burning with nameless anger. The way Musian looked at Xiao Shuixian today was obviously as if he was looking at his prey. In his previous life, he was at least the top existence in another world, but he had to watch his sister being conquered by Musian bit by bit. And Musian was the same. He was not satisfied with the Green Emperor. Wasn't he afraid that the Green Emperor would be angry? The more Xiao Hua thought about it, the angrier he felt, but he could only endure the humiliation at the moment. "I can't deal with Musian directly. He has the Green Emperor behind him. If I attack him directly, he will be suppressed by the Green Emperor. But, direct attack is not possible. What about indirect attack? Although his current strength is not 1,000th of that in his previous life, at least all the immortal arts in his previous life are still imprinted in his mind. Isn't it easy to deal with a cultivator in the refining god realm? Musian has a protector around him, but the Green Emperor can't follow him all the time." So Xiao Hua thought of a way. In his previous life, he knew a secret method. As long as there were enough materials, he could refine a nightmare, and this nightmare could devour the dreams of others and even make them sleep forever. But before that, he needed to prepare the elixir to tame the nightmare. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua also got up and left the hall, intending to prepare and refine the elixir. "Where are you going so late?" At this time, a cold and pleasant voice suddenly came from behind him. When Xiao Hua turned his head, he saw Xiao Shuixian, who was wearing a grey robe and had a graceful figure, walking from the end of the hall. "Sister." Xiao Hua almost blurted out, but soon calmed down, suppressed the throbbing in his heart, and said, "Why is sister here? Is it to see His Majesty? And it's so late, sister, are you just back from outside?" "It's just that I met a friend today and chatted with him for a few words," Xiao Shuixian answered in a flat tone. Unlike the gentleness when facing Musian today, when facing her brother, her expression was obviously much colder, as if she was intentionally maintaining her image. "Chat a few words. If the relationship is not good enough, I'm afraid you will live there directly tonight?" It would be fine if Xiao Shuixian answered truthfully, but she didn't want to let herself know that she actually went to see Musian today, and even had a good chat with him. This feeling of being kept secret made Xiao Hua's heart seem to have an unknown anger burning, and he was extremely angry. Musian is not a good person. I happened to see you talking to him in front of the Ascension platform today. Don't be fooled by his appearance, Xiao Hua said in a deep voice. Although you are the pride of Yuzhou, I'm afraid you don't know much about human hearts. His tone subconsciously added a little more teaching. Has Mr. Mu done anything bad? Xiao Shuixian frowned slightly and couldn't help asking back. This feeling of being taught by her younger brother made her very unhappy. Obviously, Xiao Hua never talked to her like this in the past. And Mr. Mu didn't do anything bad. He even gave her elixirs because of guilt before leaving today. How could he be a bad person? Xiao Hua was asked this question back, and he didn't know how to answer it for a while. What bad things have you done? If you really wait for Musian to do something bad, it will be too late. But he couldn't tell what bad things Musian had done at this moment. At this time, Xiao Shuixian suddenly looked at Xiao Hua with doubts, and whispered, "Why do you feel a little bit wrong these 2 days? You know, in the past, when Xiao Hua faced his sister, he never spoke to her in this tone, but this reaction tonight, it's inevitable that people are a little suspicious." Xiao Hua also reacted quickly and said hurriedly, "It's just that I'm worried. Musian and a few girls are unclear. I'm worried that my sister will be involved in it in the future, so." Xiao Shuixian's face eased a little, and said, "Don't worry, I know my limits." While talking, he asked casually, "Where are you going?" "I have another competition tomorrow. I want to refine a pill before that, and try to see if I can stabilize my current realm and increase my chances of winning the Ascension Conference," Xiao Hua said. He knew that his sister had given him the spot in this Ascension Conference on purpose, and that this was also to bring the siblings closer. After all, Xiao Hua and Xiao Shuixian had few opportunities to chat in the past, and the original owner of this body had always kept his feelings to himself and did not dare to let his sister know. This would not be conducive to the capture of Xiao Shuixian. It was necessary to find a common topic, and even take this opportunity to ask Xiao Shuixian about the problems of cultivation. However, Xiao Shuixian looked at his brother in astonishment as if he had heard something incredible. "You want to refine pills? So, yesterday I saw a pill disaster appear here. Could it be that you were also refining pills?" Sensing the surprised look in his sister's eyes, Xiao Hua couldn't help but reveal a faint smile on his face, and nodded slightly. "Yesterday I just needed a certain pill, so I collected the materials for refining." After he finished speaking after that, feeling Xiao Shuixian's eyes staring at him incredulously, he was even more proud in his heart, but he looked calm on the surface, and said, "By the way, who are you looking for tonight?" The cold wind was bleak, and Xiao Shuixian's grey robe was blown gently, close to her graceful figure. She looked at her brother with complicated eyes and shook her head gently. "It's okay now. What Mr. Mu said was indeed right." Xiao Hua, who lost the God King bone since childhood and had weak spiritual consciousness, could not refine pills. So the question is, how did Xiao Hua refine pills now? What happened to her brother? There was a deep suspicion in Xiao Shuixian's eyes. Just as he was about to continue testing his younger brother, at this moment, deep in the hall, a terrifying calamity suddenly came quietly. The depressing aura caused the expressions of the two siblings to change slightly. Xiao Shuixian reacted immediately, "Your Majesty, Luo Tan is refining elixirs." "However, why does your Majesty want to make elixirs when he is in good condition?" After a brief surprise, Xiao Shuixian slowly calmed down. She glanced at the young man in front of her, shook her head secretly, and walked into the depths of the hall to practice in seclusion. "Regarding my brother's matter, I need to observe more secretly. It may not be useful to keep asking him." Just when Xiao Shuixian was suspicious of his younger brother, Musian had just returned to his room and was tending to his injuries. Too many things happened today, and he needed to slow down a little. "Ruoxi has a competition tomorrow, so let's wait until her competition is over before looking for her." Sister Meng, although I want to give her some stick education, there is a high chance that Yao Meng will come to me later, so I'd better restrain myself, Musian thought to himself while meditating. Sure enough, after nearly an hour, Musian felt an extremely familiar scent in the room. How is your meditation practice going? A cold and sweet voice came to his ears. Musian opened his eyes and saw the fairy in a beautiful green dress appearing in his field of vision. Sister Kingdi. Musian seemed to want to say something, but Yao Meng immediately raised her green jade finger and pressed it against his lips. No need to explain, I know your matters best. There was a joking smile in her green eyes, and she said leisurely, after all, I lived in your body for a period of time in the past. Musian was silent. On the contrary, among these girls, it is not an exaggeration to say that Yao Meng knows him best. After all, Yao Meng has awakened in his cauldron from time to time in the past. Compared to this, I just got a good thing here not long ago that is very suitable for you. Under Musian's doubtful gaze, Yao Meng slowly raised his hand, and a pill exuding a strong medicinal fragrance appeared in his palm. This is, Musian asked subconsciously. Yao Meng stared into Musian's eyes and said word by word, Deoxin pill. Taking this elixir can further expand your natural furnace. Can the natural furnace be expanded? Musian asked excitedly, where did sister get the elixir? You know, his original natural furnace cauldron can barely accommodate a Hedeo realm, but this heart elixir can make his natural furnace cauldron advance again. It is conceivable that Yao Meng is behind it. How much effort was spent? However, Yao Meng did not explain, but said calmly. You don't have to worry about it, just take it. At the end of the sentence, she raised her eyes and drew a seductive curve at the corner of her mouth. After all, this thing is prepared for you, you shouldn't refuse it, right? I thought she would be angry at senior sister's operation today, but now it seems that I was overthinking. Sister Fairy is still very generous. Musian sighed secretly and said, in this case, then dash. However, before he reached out to take the elixir, Yao Meng took it away lightly. Then, under Musian's gaze, she raised her fingertips with a teasing smile, and deliberately held the elixir between her lips with her index finger and thumb. With her red lips lightly holding the elixir, she lowered her eyes slightly and stared at Musian with a hint of seductive charm. Even if there are no words at this moment, everything is already unspoken. Musian raised his hand and gently pressed Yao Meng's shoulder. With a gentle pressure, the Qing Emperor's sister who stood tall in the world leaned on the bed behind her. Then he lowered his head slightly and tasted the taste of the elixir. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 347. Deoxin Dan, this pill had never been heard of by Musian before, but according to Yao Meng, this Deoxin Dan could actually expand the cauldron? Musian was very surprised, and at the same time he felt a little regretful. Unfortunately, this Deoxin Dan could only expand a limited number of cauldrons, but his Tianzhengluding happened to be one of them. If I could expand my own cauldron, wouldn't I have a cauldron comparable to the return to Void Realm when I was in the refining spirit realm? However, it was a pity, but after expanding the Tianzhengluding, the spiritual energy he could give to other people when he practiced dual cultivation with them would also increase. Moreover, not to mention that the Deoxin Dan itself was quite effective, even if it was useless, it was worth taking this pill. After all, this extremely strong medicinal fragrance mixed with the lip fragrance of Sister Kingdi made it worth it even if it was an ordinary pill. Feeling the medicinal effect of Deoxin pill flowing through his body, and the lingering fragrance of the beautiful woman on his lips, Musian was about to close his eyes to refine the medicinal effect of Deoxin pill. Don't worry, Dioxin pill is an 8th grade pill. If you want to refine it directly, it will take at least 3 to 5 days, unless the ancestors of the family use the secret method to help you again this time. At this time, Yao Meng's delicate and cool jade hands gently stroked Musian's face, and a touch of joy appeared in her green eyes. She said faintly, "Refine the pill, there is no need to rush." The clear and heavenly fairy sound mixed with a little charm came to his ears, making Musian, a veteran who has been wandering among flowers for many years, feel numb. Yao Meng's rosy lips were slightly opened, and the medicinal fragrance of dioxin pill was still lingering in her mouth. With a soft breath, she gently leaned into his ear. "The night is still long. You must be very disappointed after losing today. Let me comfort you. Although I know that Sister Kingdi's charm is hard to resist, this is too much." Musian looked at Fairy Yao Meng, who was lying beside him, smiling faintly and seducing with seductive eyes, and his heartbeat accelerated a little. She looked like a fairy in a painting. Even at this moment, her beautiful green eyes were still like a pool of water in late autumn, which made people dare not have any blasphemous thoughts. But there was a playful meaning in her beautiful eyes. When looking at those eyes, people couldn't help but want to suppress this fairy who deliberately teased others and teach her a little lesson. "Sister Kingdi, I'm not that kind of person," Musian replied very reservedly. He actually wanted to ask what attitude and thoughts Yao Meng had after senior sister made a confession in public today. But since the other party didn't mention it, there was naturally no need for him to mention it specifically. "I know you're not the kind of kid who will get close to others easily." Yao Meng actually went on to cooperate with Musian's words, gently hugging the back of Musian's head with one hand, so that his face could be buried in her arms. Musian's heart was slightly moved, and for a moment he almost couldn't control himself. The warm and soft heart, and even her body temperature at the moment, all of this stimulated Musian. "I won't do anything to you, but I hope that the skills you get from me can be further advanced." A trace of joy flashed in Yao Meng's eyes, and she looked down at the boy with his face buried in her arms, and a gentle voice full of tenderness came faintly, "The choice is yours." Although she said so, there was obviously some teasing in her words. At this moment, Musian seemed to be drowning in the sweet love net woven by Yao Meng. He closed his eyes slightly, feeling the sweet smell of Yao Meng's body, and the soft voice that seemed to bewitch him. He couldn't help but sigh secretly. "This Sister Kingdi really has me in her arms. She even guessed what I was thinking and what I would do next." Although Musian had always regarded Yao Meng as his prey in the past, from the current situation, it is not certain who the prey is. Even Ye Qingxin is the same. Although Musian's alienation plan successfully made Ye Qingxin leave Ye Yu, she even developed a great affection for him. However, for Musian, Ye Qingxin is his prey, but for the ancestor of the Ye family who lives forever in the world, maybe Musian is the prey. In the past, Kingdi was already a female emperor standing in the world before Musian was born. What storms and waves had she not seen? In the end, the person who took the initiative to kiss Musian at the beginning was Kingdi, not Musian. "What's wrong? Your spiritual energy loss today is not great, it is more mental consumption. You shouldn't be so tired that you want to sleep, right?" Seeing that Musian didn't answer for a long time, Yao Meng looked down at him and blinked his autumn water eyes, which was actually a bit playful. But those who knew her well knew that this black-bellied fairy was obviously teasing him on purpose. There was still no sound in the room, and Musian, who was in Yao Meng's arms, enjoying the soft jade in his arms, still didn't speak. Just as Yao Meng raised his eyebrows and was about to speak again, Musian grabbed Yao Meng's wrist and gently moved the hand that was originally on the back of his head away. Then, before Yao Meng could react, he turned over under her slightly widened eyes and lowered his head to kiss her plump lips. "Woo!" Yao Meng's eyes widened slightly at first, with a hint of surprise in her heart. Then, she half closed her beautiful eyes, stared at Musian shyly, and hooked her hands around Musian's neck again, letting him pick her, Her curled eyelashes trembled gently, feeling the boy's extremely hot emotions at this time. After a while, green light particles in the quilt lit up silently, and the dress made of nirvana silk was put into Yao Meng's storage ring. Musian suddenly opened the quilt and pulled up the hazy bed curtain. Under Yao Meng's moist eyes, he looked down at her condescendingly. If someone didn't know the truth, they would probably doubt who was in the refining spirit realm and who was in the Hedeo realm. Yao Meng was very cooperative, even though she could suppress this little cultivator in the refining spirit realm with just a hand, but she let him do whatever he wanted. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, watching Musian lower his head and kiss her cheek, but she didn't care at all. The hair on her forehead casually fell on her jade-like white skin, adding a bit of lazy fireworks. Time flowed silently, and this empress who stood tall in the world was finally gradually suppressed by Musian, and seemed to be much more obedient. Late at night that day, after working hard all night, Musian's natural furnace had lost a lot of spiritual energy. Yao Meng gently pressed Musian on her thigh and gave him a soft and comfortable knee pillow. At this time, Yao Meng was combing his hair leisurely. What if the natural furnace was occupied? As long as the natural furnace was advanced, it would be easy for her to return to the natural furnace at that time. As for Lan Murian's intimate behavior today, although she was a little unhappy at first, she thought about it carefully later. Since she had cheated on others, she naturally had to be aware of being cheated. As long as I don't feel that I was cheated on, it means that I am cheating on others. Moreover, as long as Musian is still here with her, even if he becomes the shape of the Qing Emperor's sister, it's not certain who will be cheating on whom. Boom. Musian was enjoying the softness of Yao Meng's lap pillow when he suddenly heard a deafening thunder tribulation. He turned his head and glanced out the window, which was the direction of the south bank. It's a pill tribulation. Maybe someone is refining pills. Yao Meng glanced and explained. Warm tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter report error or contact us at the bottom to let us know. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Pill tribulation? Musian's mind moved slightly, and he asked, Sister, do you know what grade of pill tribulation it is? You know, the profession of alchemist is extremely rare. At present, the South Bank is basically occupied by cultivators from the outside world. If it is about refining pills, the most easily associated person is the Empress of Yuzhou and the people she brought with her. Yao Meng raised her hands and made hand gestures, slightly closing her eyes, as if she was calculating something. 6th grade pill tribulation. After a while, she answered. Is it the medicine king of Yuzhou? Musian guessed. Unlikely, she just refined the pill you took today, and now she should be meditating and practicing. Yao Meng shook her head. Luo Tan, who appeared in Lianji sect at this moment, was only a wisp of spiritual consciousness. After refining a dioxin pill and even passing the pill tribulation, even Luo Tan had to meditate all night. That's right, and there should be quite a few 6th grade pill medicine kings, and there is no need to refine them specially. Musian whispered to himself. So, it should be the saint son and saint daughter of Yuzhou, or Xiao Shuixian. If it was the saint daughter of Yuzhou or Xiao Shuixian, it would be fine, but if it was Xiao Hua. As if he thought of something, Musian's eyes showed a hint of coldness. Today, Xiao Hua was hiding near Tianhe Garden. Although Xiao Hua intended to restrain his hostility at that time, the natural furnace can easily capture the emotions and spiritual fluctuations of others. If Xiao Hua was refining the 6th grade elixir, what was he doing for? There will be a competition for Xiao Hua tomorrow, but he chose to refine the 6th grade elixir at this critical moment. This makes people a little concerned. However, even if it was really Xiao Hua who was refining the elixir, it would not be a big pressure for Musian. Now the whole sect knows that Musian is the Taoist partner of Qingdi's sister, and Qingdi will definitely be in Tianhe Garden. Now, even a fool would not dare to attack Musian in Tianhe Garden. Unless, I happen to be not in Tianhe Garden one day, and there happens to be no protector around to protect him secretly. Musian inadvertently drew a faint arc. It seems that even if Xiaohua does not intend to take action, he can still lure Xiaohua ashore. Yao Meng glanced at the smile on Musian's face, which appeared intentionally or unintentionally, and knew what he should be planning. However, she did not intend to ask further questions, giving Musian appropriate freedom, which itself is also a kind of experience for him. By the way, sister, do you know what the identity of the old man in Yayu's body is? At this time, Musian suddenly remembered this matter and couldn't help asking. Hearing this, Yao Meng also came back to his senses from his previous thoughts, looked down at Musian, and said leisurely, Yao Shan, he was quite famous in Dongzhou in the past. After enlightenment, he traveled around Zhuzhou and practiced alchemy in Yuzhou. Speaking of which, Yao Shan is still half a disciple of Luo Tan. Sister Qingdi also knows him, Musian said in surprise. The profession of alchemist is extremely special in Zhuzhou. In the past, when Yao Shan traveled around Zhuzhou, he always wanted to make friends with various forces. In addition, he was able to refine 9th grade elixirs when he was in the state of enlightenment. He wanted to make friends with people, and others were naturally willing, Yao Meng explained. Over time, the people he knew were all over Zhuzhou. In the past, Luo Tan had a cauldron in his hand, named the All Things Transformation Cauldron. In the past, there were rumors that with this cauldron, he could refine immortal elixirs above the 9th grade. At that time, Yao Shan wanted to borrow the All Things Transformation Cauldron, and was naturally rejected by Luo Tan. Hearing Qingdi telling the unknown secrets of the past, Musian fell into deep thought while leisurely enjoying the softness of Qingdi's sister's knee pillow. Why did Yao Shan die later? He suddenly asked. It stands to reason that an alchemist who knows all kinds of bigwigs in Zhuzhou, not to mention calling the wind and rain in Zhuzhou, but if he wants to live in a corner, no one will dare to provoke him. Why did he end up in Yayu's body? Perhaps he was blinded by the All Things Transformation Cauldron, or perhaps he got too proud of himself because he had met many powerful people in the past. Yao Shan took a fancy to the All Things Transformation Cauldron and wanted to secretly borrow it, but was eventually discovered by Luo Tan. What will happen if the only alchemist in the Hedao realm in Zhuzhou gets angry? The result is imaginable. Yao Meng chuckled, and her slender hand caressed Musian's face intentionally or unintentionally, and continued, Yao Shan died, leaving only the remaining spiritual consciousness. Most people thought he had died, but they didn't expect that he is now living in Yayu's body. No wonder, it turns out that this person had many friends in the past. Hearing this, Musian thought of Yayu's various operations and almost laughed out loud. Since Yao Shan can meet many powerful people, he should have a high EQ. Why doesn't he know how to teach Yayu? In his previous life, Yao Shan was in the state of enlightenment, but he was able to refine the 9th grade elixir. It was no wonder that he was popular. When he thought of this, Musian once again lamented his luck. If he hadn't happened to meet Linglong and Yao Meng, he probably wouldn't have been able to take the shortcut to cultivation so quickly, or even experience how good Sister Qingdi was. From the past to now, although he has helped Yao Meng a lot, Yao Meng has helped him more. It can be said that this soft rice is really delicious. When Musian thought of this, his eyes fell on Yao Meng intentionally or unintentionally. After a few glances, Musian felt that the state that had gradually entered the sage mode seemed to be starting to stir again. It's been nearly 2 hours, and you're still not satisfied. Yao Meng was slightly stunned. Even with her temperament, her face was slightly red, and she couldn't help but feel a little more happy in her heart. When the two of them stared at each other, the affection in their eyes also burned again in the room. The next morning, deep in a hall on the south bank, Xiaohua slowly opened his eyes from his meditation. He slowly opened his palm and looked at the pill in his palm. 6th grade pill, Ningzi pill. This pill is not for people to take, but for feeding nightmares. Nightmare can only obey the master's orders after taking this pill, and through this nightmare, he can cast the curse-killing technique. By then, even if Musian doesn't die, he will probably suffer a lot. If you want to blame you for provoking someone you shouldn't have provoked. Xiao Hua sneered secretly, put away the pill, and then stood up and strode out of the hall. Today's first competition is his battle against Bairuoxi, the Taoist companion beside Musian. Before teaching you a lesson, let's take some interest from your Taoist companion first. Luo Tan must have come to watch the Ascension Conference today, and this is the best time for him to shine. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 348. Although Musian could already guess the result of the contest between Bairuoxi and Xiao Hua, he was still somewhat interested in this treasure-hunting rat who was suspected to be the chosen one, so he still planned to watch it at the Ascension Conference. Moreover, even if this incident did not happen, Ruoxi's contest should still be seen. After losing to senior sister, I feel a lot more relaxed. Before, I had to worry about what to do if I lost. Now it's good, I can just lie down and mess up. Musian sighed in his heart, and after entangled with Yao Meng in the quilt for a while, he reluctantly got out of bed. He left the room, breathing the morning air, his eyes wandering carelessly in front of the courtyard, but he did not see the slender figure of the maid. It seems that the strength shown by senior sister yesterday made Sister Mengro feel pressured. Musian said in his heart. He was a little surprised. After all, every morning when he woke up, Musian could see the maids in the courtyard staring at the scenery, but today he could not see anyone. It seemed that the senior sister had put great pressure on Wei Mengru yesterday, and she was still meditating in the room. Musian pondered for a moment, and finally decided not to disturb Wei Mengru for the time being. He took out the first-generation Demon King ring from the ring, and then sat in front of the courtyard and injected a wisp of his spiritual consciousness. Everything in front of him gradually became illusory. When Musian opened his eyes again, what appeared in his vision was no longer the courtyard of Tianhe Garden, but in front of a seemingly vast hall. Yesterday, Yao Meng absorbed a lot of heavenly spiritual energy from his body, and now he naturally had to take this opportunity to absorb the lost heavenly spiritual energy into the natural furnace. Ordinary cultivators could not absorb the heavenly spiritual energy in their entire lives, but Musian was the maker of the heavenly rules, so there was naturally no such restriction. Buzz. While absorbing the spiritual energy in the heavenly palace into the Tiansheng furnace, after nearly a quarter of an hour, Musian suddenly felt a slight vibration in the ring. He suddenly opened his eyes and took out a small black box from the ring. The black box left by the original witch. The black box looked simple and unremarkable, but it was actually vibrating faintly at this time. Is the original witch also related to the heavenly palace? Or is the black box left by the original witch also one of the treasures in the heavenly palace? Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he slowly opened the black box. Boom! Almost in the next moment, in the heavenly palace, the rich spiritual energy wrapped in a wisp of misty light rushed into the black box frantically. And in the black box, there was a ray of light gushing out, and even a strange phenomenon appeared in the air. It stands to reason that only those who are recognized by the heavenly court can absorb the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. Could it be that the original witch has also been to the heavenly court in the past? Musian's mind moved slightly, and he thought of this possibility. However, he quickly gathered the messy thoughts in his mind. The time to absorb the spiritual energy of the heavenly court is limited every day. These problems should be thought about slowly after returning. Now the more important thing is to replenish the spiritual energy that was squeezed by Yao Meng last night, and Ruoxi's competition will start soon, so he has to hurry up. After half an hour, Musian finished his meditation and came to the south bank, and saw Bai Ruoxi standing quietly in front of the competition platform. The cold wind blew, and the snow-white palace skirt was close to her graceful figure. The plum blossoms embroidered on the fabric seemed to dance with it, highlighting Bai Ruoxi's beautiful face. Not far opposite Bai Ruoxi, a handsome young man was standing there with his hands behind his back. He closed his eyes silently, as if he was adjusting his mentality. Xiao Hua. According to the current reactions, this person is likely to be the second chosen son of the heavenly Dao of Zhuzhu. Not far away, Xiao Shuixian saw Musian flying from the south bank on a sword. It seems that he should have just arrived not long ago. Mr. Mu, what a coincidence. I didn't expect you to come today. Musian's face was originally still thinking about the black box. But when he heard Xiao Shuixian's voice, he immediately restrained his thoughts and smiled. I was indeed a little disappointed after losing yesterday, but I am also interested in today's competition, so I came to see it. Miss Xiao, are you here to see your brother's performance? Xiao Shuixian nodded gently, and then looked at the young man on the stage with a calm face, as if he contained the breath of an otherworldly master, and couldn't help but think of Xiao Hua's various performances yesterday. A person with weak spiritual consciousness since childhood, even the Queen of Luton once said that it would be very difficult for Xiao Hua to refine high-quality elixirs with his weak spiritual consciousness. But Xiao Hua did it yesterday. This inevitably makes people suspicious. Musian inadvertently took a few glances at the graceful figure of the grey-robed woman. It was winter, and she was wearing a grey robe and a hood. She tried to be as low-key as possible and did not seem to attract the attention of others. But if you saw the face of this woman or even her identity, you would definitely be surprised. After all, Xiao Shuixian was one of the best among her peers in the most sacred Zunyun Academy in Yuzhou. Miss Xiao, is there anything wrong with your face? I feel that your face seems a little bit wrong. Musian looked at her with a concerned look and asked sincerely. Xiao Shuixian woke up a little, looked at Musian with a complicated look, and then shook her head gently, saying, "It's okay." Xiao Hua's matter is a bit complicated, and she doesn't know how to explain it to Musian at the moment. Should she tell him that she suspects that some kind of earth-shaking changes have taken place in her brother, and even that his body has been occupied by the spiritual consciousness of a certain ancient great power? No one would believe such words, even if she told the maids around His Majesty Luotan, the other party would probably not believe it. But no matter what, as long as she looks at her brother's performance in the competition today, she can probably see some clues. After all, she is still very clear about what kind of skills Xiao Hua knows. Mr. Mu, who do you think will win today's competition? Xiao Shuixian changed the subject lightly and looked sideways. Musian saw the woman's beautiful and refined face through the hood. Although the robe was a little loose, the cold wind made the proud and upright chest particularly conspicuous, and the curve of the water snake waist was beautiful. With years of experience, he could tell at a glance that she was a beauty in the world. But Musian did not stay on Xiao Shuixian for long. He soon looked up at the competition arena and said with a smile, "I know about Ruoxi's strength, but Brother Xiao always feels that his spiritual consciousness is much stronger than the first time I saw him, so I am not sure about the outcome." Xiao Hua's spiritual consciousness is stronger than before. Does Master Mu think so too? Xiao Shuixian's mind moved, her rosy little mouth slightly opened, and she was about to speak. At this time, the voice of an old man slowly sounded in front of the competition arena. "Both sides are ready, the first competition of the day is about to begin." Seeing this, Xiao Shuixian stopped talking and focused her attention on the competition arena not far away. And Musian glanced around carelessly. He did not see the figures of senior sister and sister Feiying today. I think he planned to concentrate on preparing for his next competition. But it's hard to choose between Fei Ying and Qian'er. Sister Fei Ying started practicing a long time earlier than Qian'er. Qian'er is not very old, so it's highly likely that she won't be able to beat Sister Fei Ying. No matter who loses, just comfort her. As for senior sister, Musian seemed to have a headache and pinched his eyebrows. It was naturally gratifying that senior sister was interested in him, but senior sister's personality was somewhat similar to that of a domineering female CEO in reality. If she entered the fish pond in the future, it would probably cause a huge uproar. Especially if she won the Ascension Conference, it would be troublesome. I have to find a way to test senior sister's tone again and make plans early. Musian was thinking about this when the atmosphere in the cave was gradually tense. Even the cultivators from the outside world noticed this terrifying atmosphere and swallowed their saliva secretly. On one side is the proud disciple of Canghai Peak, and on the other side is one of the saints of Yuzhou. Although Xiao Hua Scent this time is not the strongest, he is also the pride of Yuzhou, and is very likely to be a genius who will be able to refine the spirit and return to the void in the future. No one knows who will win on both sides at this moment. I have heard of the name of Miss Bairuoxi before. Today, I see that she is indeed as rumored, a rare girl of heaven. Xiao Hua showed a gentle smile, with that handsome face, which can be said to be magnificent. But Bairuoxi ignored it, closed her eyes silently, and pretended not to hear it. If the other party had no grudges with Musian, she might have replied politely. However, Musian had said before that there were some grudges between him and Xiao Hua. Since they were enemies, there was naturally no need to care. Moreover, although Xiao Hua could be called handsome, compared with a nobleman like Musian, his temperament alone was already a step behind. Xiao Hua's smile remained unchanged, but there was an unknown anger rising in his heart. A mere girl in the realm of refining spirits, if she were in her previous life, would she dare to give him no face? But it doesn't matter. After today's competition is over, she will know that although they are both in the 8th level of refining spirits, the gap between them is like an unbridgeable gap. The atmosphere here has begun to gradually brew, and at this moment in front of the Ascension platform, Yao Meng has only arrived late at this moment. She is as pure as the fairy in the eyes of the world in the past, with a faint arc on her pink lips, staring at the cave in the distance. Luo Tan leaned on the chair and glanced at Yao Meng inadvertently. And this glance made her pale golden eyes freeze on Yao Meng's face. At this time, a strand of hair of the Green Emperor fell on her flawless face. Compared with the fairy spirit in the past, she seemed to have a bit more lazy fireworks today, with a kind of charming temperament, extremely charming. What's the matter? Yao Meng glanced at Luo Tan beside her, with a faint smile in her eyes. Luo Tan shook his head gently and smiled lightly. I just feel that Fairy Yao Meng's temperament today seems to be different from the past, so I am a little concerned. Yao Meng's temperament today seems to be several times more attractive than in the past, but even Luo Tan couldn't tell what happened to her. It's just that I have some insights in cultivation, Yao Meng said lightly. However, when this was said, both Luo Tan and Ye Qingxin were a little more surprised, and even many elders who heard the conversation between the two not far away looked over. After the integration of the Dao, it is impossible to make another half a step by practicing alone. How did Fairy Yao Meng gain new insights? Luo Tan couldn't help but ask. Ye Qingxin, who was the only one who knew the secret of Musian, looked at Yao Meng deeply, with some meaningful meaning. The heavenly aura in Musian's body will be transformed into a more special aura after being transformed by the Tiansheng furnace. Judging from the various performances of the Qing Emperor, the perception she mentioned would not be. However, under the gaze of everyone, Yao Meng just chuckled, and her green fingertips slowly passed along the tender white jade legs, and raised her head to look at a place under the Shengxian platform. Who knows? Although she likes green people, she will not attract all the enemies of the Hedao realm. The fewer Hedeo realms who know the secret of the Tiansheng furnace, the better. The competition begins. Just at this time, the voice of the old man came from the front of the competition stage, and the fall of this voice also made people's attention fall on the front of the cave. Buzz. The long sword behind Xiao Hua was unsheathed under the vibration, accompanied by a humming sound, and the sword body seemed to have intertwined runes flashing, and the sense of pressure came towards Bairuoxi overwhelmingly. Boom! There was a deafening thunder in the cave, and when the sword was swung out, it seemed to turn into a thunder dragon, as if to swallow Bairuoxi. As one of the holy sons of Yuzhou, even if the god King Bone was taken away since childhood, at least the Empress Luo Tan also asked people to give him elixirs to nourish his body. Now Xiao Hua, his strength is naturally the best among his peers. Although Bairuoxi is an inner disciple of Canghai Peak, you must know that there are many inner disciples of Canghai Peak. Although there are many resources that can be given, it is impossible to be so many that they can't be used up. As for the Bai family behind her, it is impossible to give any great help. Although the two are in the same realm, there is a gap in resources between the two. If it is a normal competition, how can Bairuoxi be Xiao Hua's opponent? At the moment, everyone was watching this battle under the Ascension platform, including some disciples of the Lianji sect, who were not optimistic about Bairuoxi's battle. Although they were biased towards their junior sister, they also knew that it would be extremely difficult for Bairuoxi to win. Bairuoxi raised her palm and slapped the thunder dragon, with ancient runes flashing in her palm. That palm blasted the thunder dragon away, but she also stepped back a few steps. Not bad. Xiao Hua nodded slightly, not surprised by the result of this attack, but with a bit of appreciation. This thunder dragon smelted by runes was one of his moves in his previous life, and it was powerful, but the opponent was also an inner disciple of the Lianji sect, so it was normal for him to catch his attack. The situation is not optimistic. This Xiao Hua is really a child of destiny. Some cultivators frowned secretly and praised aloud. Bairuoxi's talent is high, but in actual combat, she is still a little worse than those who fight outside and have a murderous aura. I'm afraid the outcome of this battle has been decided. Many cultivators discussed and believed that Xiao Hua, a genius who had been tempered outside for many years, would definitely be much stronger than Bairuoxi, a flower that grew up in a greenhouse. At least Xiao Hua has won in terms of momentum. After this fight, Bairuoxi was obviously at a disadvantage, which anyone with a discerning eye could see. Miss Bai, if you keep hiding your shortcomings, I'm afraid your Ascension conference will end here. Only Xiao Hua had a sharp eye, and saw at a glance that Bairuoxi was deliberately hiding her shortcomings, and was not serious, and spoke in a calm tone. You are right. Bairuoxi nodded slightly and glanced outside the cave inadvertently. Although she couldn't see Muzian, she knew that Mu Lang should be watching her outside at this moment. Yesterday's incident with Lan Murian had already made her extremely angry. Now that she remembered that this person was not only Mu Lang's enemy, but also had a contemptuous attitude, she naturally displeased this great beauty. The next moment, a golden light shone behind Bairuoxi, and then, from that golden light, the ancestral weapon that symbolized the strongest sword palace appeared silently in the cave. Almost at that moment, all the swords inside and outside the cave made a buzzing sound, as if they were surrendering to this ancient bronze sword. Xiao Hua used his spiritual energy to suppress the sword in his hand that seemed to be about to fly out of his hand at the first time, and his eyes were fixed on the bronze sword in Bairuoxi's hand. Ancestor weapon, he narrowed his eyes and was secretly shocked. I didn't expect that the Bai family, an ordinary force, could actually take out such a sacred object as the ancestral weapon. After a brief shock, Xiao Hua quickly reappeared, a faint smile on his face. Although I have the ancestral weapon, with Miss Bai's realm, how much spiritual energy can remain in the cauldron after she sacrifices the ancestral weapon? If a cultivator in the refining spirit realm wants to sacrifice the bronze sword, he needs to inject at least 70% of the spiritual energy in the cauldron into it. After all, the ancestral weapon is the weapon of the great power of the Hedeo realm before his death. To use the ancestral weapon is equivalent to awakening the ancestral spiritual consciousness in the ancestral weapon. It can be said that as long as he blocks this attack, he will be the winner. The couple are equally stupid. Musian had sacrificed the heaven asking lock twice in a row before and won narrowly. Now Bairuoxi used the same method again. However, he is completely different from Yayu. When it is absolutely necessary, he can even forcefully use the secret method to break through the threshold of the refining spirit realm. It's a pity that your opponent is me. Feel sorry, Bairuoxi. There was a blazing fire on Xiao Hua's body, and lightning was wrapped around him. Hair flying, hands behind his back, like a young god king, with a confident and powerful look. Seeing Bairuoxi slashing out with the sword, Xiao Hua was not afraid at all and activated the secret method. He punched out, and the fire burst out, and he actually blocked the fatal blow of Bairuoxi's bronze sword. This Xiao Hua is too strong. He seems to be activating the secret method, and his strength is close to returning to the void. Outside the cave, many cultivators were shocked, and some female disciples were even more brilliant. Xiao Hua's strength has exceeded everyone's expectations. Only Luo Tan in front of the ascension platform couldn't help but narrow his eyes and look at the young man in the cave. Xiao Narcissus was also stunned for a moment, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. When did Xiao Hua learn this secret method? Also, not only his realm, but also his spiritual consciousness has become so strong at this moment, which is a bit wrong. Mr. Mu, it seems that the winner has been decided. Although she thought so, Xiao Shuixian still looked at Musian and said softly. Yes, the winner has been decided. Musian smiled leisurely. Although both of them said that the winner had been decided, the people they thought were the winners were completely different. After all, Bairuoxi's body was also full of Musian's natural furnace spirit. How could it reach the limit with just this level? In the cave, with the two people's attack, dust and smoke rose everywhere. Xiao Hua still had his hands behind his back, his feet on the flying sword, staring at the slender white figure in the smoke, with a faint smile on his face. Miss Bai, do you want to continue? The winner has been decided. After this attack, Bairuoxi's spiritual energy was mostly depleted, and after he activated the secret method, there was still nearly an incense stick of time to end, and the winner was already decided. The smoke dissipated silently, and Xiao Hua was just about to see the pale and exhausted look of Musian, the beautiful Taoist companion. However, when he looked over, the smile on his face gradually solidified. The winner has indeed been decided, Bairuoxi said faintly. After she sacrificed the ancestral weapon, the bronze sword had already disappeared silently. However, the next moment, a grand and vast golden light lit up behind Bairuoxi. The vast golden light lit up behind her like a tsunami, setting off the snow-white palace skirt into a noble golden color as bright as day. Countless bronze swords emerged silently from the golden tsunami. This shocking scene made the outside world silent for a moment. Xiao Hua opened his eyes wide, staring at the scene in the same incredible way, his heart full of disbelief. How is it possible? You know, if a cultivator in the refining spirit realm wants to sacrifice the ancestral spirit in the ancestral weapon, even if the family bloodline is pure, at least more than 60% of the spiritual energy must be sacrificed. Even if Bairuoxi is the purest bloodline of the Bai family, after this attack, she can't sacrifice the bronze sword for the second time. What's more, there are more than 90 bronze swords behind her at this moment. Buzz. The next moment, 2 bronze swords behind Bairuoxi were unsheathed, and the sword light flashed, rushing towards Xiao Hua. In front of the ascension platform, even Luo Tan seemed a little stunned. Until a moment later, she reacted almost immediately, slightly widened her beautiful eyes, and subconsciously said, Gonglianyu. The time of the Sword Palace Master's Hedeo was later than Luotan, but in the entire Jizhu, if there is a Hedeo realm with the strongest destructive power, it is Gonglianyu. It's not that Bairuoxi can continuously offer bronze swords to invite the spirits of ancestors, but she is the master of the Sword Palace, so how can she invite spirits? Boom! The vast golden ocean almost filled the entire cave. Xiao Hua's eyes were filled with reluctance and anger, and the spiritual consciousness in his body was furious. I am a great master, but I was completely crushed by a stinky girl who was still wet behind the ears. No. How is it possible? At this moment, Xiao Hua's heart was full of humiliation, and in the next moment, unprecedented power broke out in his body, and the terrifying spiritual pressure seemed to destroy Bairuoxi to death. That was his spiritual consciousness in his previous life, the spiritual consciousness of the Great Enlightenment, which was equivalent to the suppression of blood, and the cultivators of the refining God realm could not resist it at all. If you want to blame, blame your opponent, me, little girl. Xiao Hua's mouth curled up a faint arc, and his sight fell on Bairuoxi. But this glance made Xiao Hua's eyes finally completely stagnant. Clearly, the Bairuoxi he saw a moment ago was still a young lady in a white dress with a gentle temperament. But when he blinked, what he saw was no longer a weak young lady, but a woman in a black and white interwoven dress with a more seductive and charming temperament. She slowly opened her gorgeous eyes, staring at Xiao Hua calmly, and a black and red light appeared behind her. From that light, it seemed that 3 foxtails were shaking gently. Puff! As if looking at an unreachable abyss, a dense sense of fear overflowed from the bottom of his heart. Xiao Hua spurted out a mouthful of blood and retreated violently. He covered his chest and gasped, with some lingering fear in his eyes. At this time, the bronze sword turned into a golden light and fell down. Xiao Hua's consciousness finally gradually fell into the endless darkness. The outside of the field fell into a dead silence. Compared to Lan Murian's almost overwhelming strength yesterday, Bairuoxi's performance today was even more shocking. Lan Murian's strength was the kind that oppressed others to the point of suffocation, while Bairuoxi's strength today was extremely brilliant just from the fighting skills. In front of the ascension platform, Luo Tan's eyes were more meaningful. After taking a look at the scene in the cave, he said faintly, "In the past, I thought that Shang Yanfei accepted this bet too abruptly, but today it seems that I was wrong. Bairuoxi alone is enough to crush fellow cultivators, not to mention that there is also Lan Murian in Lianji Peak. And this Bairuoxi's methods are too similar to those of the Sword Palace Master she knew in the past. Does the Green Emperor also know about this?" Luo Tan slightly turned his eyes and glanced at Fairy Yao Meng beside him. She looked normal and did not show any surprise at all. It seems, should the Green Emperor know about this? In addition, Xiao Hua's performance just now was also surprising. It was unexpected in every sense. Luo Tan looked deeply at Xiao Hua, who was already unconscious in the cave. While the venue was still in deathly silence, Xiao Shuixian in the crowd on the other side also had a solemn expression. She stared straight at her unconscious brother with a bit of complexity in her eyes. At this time, Musian beside her suddenly patted her shoulder gently, and then a charming and gentle voice came to her ears, "Miss Xiao is so worried about her brother? Don't worry, Ruoxi has reservations, I think brother Xiao will be fine." As he said, he took out a jade bottle from the ring, looked at Xiao Shuixian and said, "This elixir can heal brother Xiao's injuries, if you don't mind, take it." Xiao Shuixian slowly woke up from her previous thoughts, looking at Musian's gentle demeanor, and thinking of Xiao Hua's bad attitude towards Musian last night, she couldn't help but feel a little more sorry for him. I really don't know what Xiao Hua is thinking. He has been in contact with Mr. Mu for some time. Mr. Mu can be said to be humble and gentle, and his way of speaking and tone are also very comfortable. How can he have bad intentions? Although she thought so, Xiao Shuixian still shook her head and politely rejected Muzian, saying, Mr. Mu should keep the elixir for himself. After this, the maids around His Majesty Luo Tan will give him elixir treatment. Mr. Mu doesn't have to worry about him. Muzian shook his head and looked at her with a complicated look. I'm not worried about him, but Miss Xiao seemed to have a serious face just now, so I can't help but worry. At this moment, he had helplessness in his eyes, as well as some admiration hidden deep in his eyes. After saying that, he smiled bitterly and sighed softly, forget it, it's okay. I have only met him a few times, why did he? Even though she thought so, Xiao Shuixian's pretty face still blushed slightly, and she couldn't help feeling a little ashamed. Then, she hesitated for a moment and said in a voice transmission, Mr. Mu, Shuixian is actually concerned about something, but I think you may not believe it if I tell you. I believe it, Muzian said without hesitation. I haven't even said what it is yet, Mr. Mu believes it. Xiao Shuixian couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Muzian smiled and said, I believe everything you say. Even though Xiao Shuixian couldn't help but give Muzian a blank look, knowing that the other party's words were obviously meant to please her. But a little joy still rose in her heart. Afterwards, Xiao Shuixian slightly reorganized her thoughts, raised her head and stared into Muzian's eyes, and said in a voice transmission. To be honest, since Mr. Mu said that my brother's alchemy was a little strange, I began to have some doubts. Xiao Shuixian slowly recounted her doubts after seeing Xiao Hua last night, and Muzian nodded frequently and listened carefully. Until the end, he couldn't help but raise a faint arc at the corner of his mouth. It seems that Xiao Hua is indeed the chosen one. After knowing this, it will be easy to deal with. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 349. If Muzian had only guessed that Xiao Hua was the chosen one before, then from the verification of Xiao Shuixian's words this time, Muzian was almost certain. After Yayu's luck was suppressed several times, his luck was reduced, and the heavenly Dao in Zhuzhu chose a new chosen one. This chosen one is Xiao Hua. Of course, this does not mean that Yayu was abandoned, but compared to the past, the person favored by the heavenly Dao today is probably not Yayu, but Xiao Hua. The heavenly Dao of Zhuzhu chose the chosen one, and in the dark, they all led the chosen one to collide with him. This is clearly targeting the new heavenly Dao. Having said that, isn't this just a treasure-hunting rat? Muzian chuckled secretly. The heavenly Dao obviously has no self-awareness, but only decides the chosen one based on talent, so the people chosen are all strange. Yayu is extremely talented but impatient, and Xiao Hua, although nothing can be seen now, judging from his unwillingness to lose to Ruoxi and his use of secret techniques, he is not much different from Yayu. If the beauty is chosen as the chosen one, it may bring him some trouble. Muzian narrowed his eyes and pretended to be surprised when he heard Xiao Shuixian talking about Xiao Hua's affairs. Miss Shuixian said that Xiao Hua's performance is different from the Xiao Hua you know, and she doubts his identity. If you talk about this matter directly with His Majesty Luo Tan, I'm afraid she won't believe it. No wonder you were so unconfident just now. Muzian was full of sighs, looking up at Ruoxi who had already walked out of the cave, and Xiao Hua who finally woke up after being injected with a ray of spiritual energy by the old man on the martial arts stage, and continued. But I think neither you nor I want to admit that Brother Xiao Hua has been occupied by some evil spiritual consciousness, so we need to observe it again. Xiao Shuixian nodded imperceptibly when she heard this, but sighed in her heart. The God King bone is now in her body, and in the past she always felt that she owed her brother, so she asked people to take care of him secretly, and Xiao Shuixian naturally knew some of her brother's thoughts. If her brother is really no longer the real him, then what should she do on her side? While Xiao Shuixian was tangled, Muzian was leisurely looking at Xiao Hua who had just woken up not far away. He looked pale and noticed a very familiar gaze. When he looked over, he saw his sister standing with Musian. The two were whispering in each other's ears while looking in his direction, looking very interested. Even though he was extremely weak at this moment, a gleam of brilliance seemed to flash in Xiao Hua's eyes, and hatred was burning in his heart. Musian smiled at him gently as if he didn't feel it. It looked quite friendly, but it made Xiao Hua completely gloomy. Provocation. If it was the self in the previous life, such an ant could be crushed to death with a raised hand, why should it be humiliated like now? And this Xiao Shuixian kept saying that she was innocent with Musian, but her current performance didn't look innocent at all. Xiao Hua was filled with resentment. Although his consciousness was blurred, the obsession of the original owner in his heart became stronger and stronger, constantly impacting his spiritual consciousness. In anger, he lowered his eyes slightly, and there was a little more coldness in his eyes. At this time, Musian glanced at Xiao Hua inadvertently, but he had already noticed the hostility in his eyes just now. Just a little intimacy with Xiao Hua's sister, he was already so angry, and Xiao Hua must not sit still and wait for death. Next, I think Xiao Hua will attack him secretly. However, simply attacking him secretly is seeking death. The only method Xiao Hua can use is probably similar to that of Gu boxing that day. For example, curse spells. Of course, before that, I have to ask Ruoxi again. She has sparred with Xiao Hua, and I think she knows the changes of Xiao Hua in the battle best. Musian found an excuse to say goodbye to Xiao Shuixian at the right time, and then arrived near the arena. Seeing Bai Ruoxi step down from the arena, all the disciples looked at this cold and weak young lady. Congratulations, junior sister. After this battle, the resources that my Kanghai Peak can obtain in the future will also be multiplied several times. Several senior brothers and sisters from Kanghai Peak congratulated Bai Ruoxi. This Ascension Conference is very special, and those who can stand at the end of the Ascension Conference can be said to be talented people, and Bai Ruoxi is one of them. If she can win, Kanghai Peak, which used to be the last of the main peaks, can naturally be proud of it. You have achieved such an achievement in less than a year after joining the section. Junior sister's talent is really enviable. Listening to all kinds of praises in her ears, Bai Ruoxi did not feel proud at all, and still chatted modestly with the senior brothers and sisters around her. If Bai Ruoxi was just a genius in Tianqian City in the past, then now she is already a girl of heaven who can look down on Zhu. But under these layers of glamorous appearance, how much Musian has silently paid behind the scenes is completely unknown to others, only Bai Ruoxi knows. Behind every successful protagonist, there is naturally a selfless and dedicated female protagonist. Bai Ruoxi knows that if it weren't for Musian, she alone would not have been able to get to where she is now. When she thought of this, Bai Ruoxi, who was like a star surrounded by the moon, swept her eyes through the crowd under the arena, and happened to meet Musian's sight. A blush appeared on her beautiful face, and her beautiful eyes flashed with sweetness and tenderness. After smiling and chatting with everyone for a few words, she looked at Musian, who had left the place, and then found an excuse to get away and left. After a while, she noticed a ray of spiritual energy that Musian deliberately released after leaving the ascension platform. Bai Ruoxi came on the flying sword and saw Musian, who was enjoying the mountain scenery on a talisman bridge on the south bank. She said softly, "Mu Lang, why did you run out by yourself? There are many people inside, it's quieter here. Congratulations, you can come this far, and Senior Yi Hao must be proud of it." Musian walked up, held Bai Ruoxi's delicate and cool soft hand, and said in a gentle voice. His eyes fell on Bai Ruoxi. She was wearing a white palace skirt, which blended in with the white snow. It seemed that the battle just now had caused Gong Lianyu to have signs of awakening. Bai Ruoxi's cold and weak appearance seemed to have a seductive temperament that she had never had before. I haven't got what I really want yet. Bai Ruoxi raised her eyes and stared at Musian's handsome face, saying faintly. What do you want? Musian asked in a puzzled manner. Biruoxi turned her face away, her side face was slightly flushed, but she pursed her lips, looked at Musian with resentment, and said nothing. Such a little woman's posture, coupled with that cold and weak face, is more attractive, enough to make men want to protect her, and even hope to bully her in bed. Musian's heart was also moved, and he stared directly at Biruoxi's flawless face. By the way, about Xiao Hua whom you asked me to pay attention to, I did feel something strange just now. At this time, Biruoxi suddenly changed the subject, as if he was a little embarrassed by being stared at by Musian. Your feeling is right. When Xiao Hua fought with me before, I did feel that he was not the real Xiao Hua. There seemed to be a residual obsession in his body. Biruoxi's face became much more solemn. This feeling could only be felt accurately by Biruoxi, who was in the cave at that time, because the pressure of Xiao Hua's spiritual consciousness was only directed at Biruoxi at that time. It's just that Xiao Hua, who was a great man in his previous life, did not expect that the opponent he faced was also the Son of Heaven. It can even be said to be the protagonist of this world. Does Xiao Hua have an obsession that does not belong to him? Musian narrowed his eyes, and soon he thought of something, and there was a little more interest in his eyes. Obsession, this is different from spiritual consciousness. The so-called obsession refers to the wish that has not been completed in life, so it wanders in the world. Thinking of what Xiao Shuixian said before, Musian also had some more guesses in his mind. Does it look like a reborn person? No, should it be a time traveler? The spiritual consciousness occupies the body of the original owner. This seems to be a very popular time travel flow. Ruoxi, you really helped a lot. Musian quickly gathered his thoughts and looked at Miss Bai, who had a lot of breasts, and her beautiful face set off by her soft and smooth hair like a waterfall. It's good to be able to help, but what does Mu Lang plan to do next? Deal with him. Biruoxi raised her head and asked curiously. If I solve Xiao Hua directly, how can I reduce his luck? Naturally, I have to squeeze out the value of the treasure hunting rat first, Musian said. I don't like to fight with others, so naturally I don't plan to deal with him directly. Yes, I don't plan to do it directly. Compared to taking the initiative, he prefers to be passive. Xiao Hua returned to the hall on the south bank with a gloomy face. He was in a very bad mood and even felt extremely humiliated. First he was defeated by Biruoxi, and then he was mocked by Musian in front of him. Although Musian didn't say anything at the time, he nodded and smiled at him hypocritically while chatting with Xiao Shuixian. Isn't this a naked mockery? Your performance today is already good. His Majesty Luo Tan said that you don't have to feel sorry. The identity of the opponent is beyond your imagination. It's not shameful to lose. The maid beside Luo Tan spoke softly and calmly, comforting her. Xiao Hua smiled at her reluctantly, but he was still very annoyed in his heart. Fortunately, I have already refined the pill, and the nightmare is also ready. After sending the maid away, Xiao Hua's face gradually became cold, and he stretched out his palm. From the palm of his hand, a round pill appeared in his palm. Roar! Suddenly, a gust of cold wind whistled in his ears, and in the cold wind, a strange black shadow with only one eye appeared in his vision. Nightmare, to be precise, it should be a void nightmare. This nightmare originated from the world where Xiao Hua lived in the past. It can travel through the void, and it is also the result of his hard work for nearly half of his life. However, this nightmare does not recognize him as the master. Every time he lets the nightmare erode others, he needs to consume a lot of blood. As long as he urges this nightmare to invade other people's dreams, he can devour the dreams. And by the next day, the other party will not have any memory of dreaming. In the long run, the other party will slowly indulge in dreams and it will be difficult to wake up. Just now, he saw Musian leave the south bank, and the Green Emperor was still in the ascension platform. This is the best time to take action. Although I am injured, if you offend me, you should be mentally prepared. Xiao Hua threw the pill to the void nightmare, and at that moment, the strange mysterious black shadow set off a crow-black whirlwind, and a gloomy breath almost enveloped the entire room. The next moment, the nightmare actually swallowed the pill completely. This pill is equivalent to the sum of hundreds of dreams, and is a sacrifice used to nourish the void nightmare. Only in this way can the void nightmare obey his orders. However, even after Xiao Hua's order, the void nightmare did not move at all, but stared at him grimly with strange eyes. A 6th grade pill containing hundreds of dreams is not satisfied. Xiao Hua's eyes turned cold, and he gritted his teeth secretly, and spit out a mouthful of blood. The blood contained his blood essence, which was also swallowed by the void nightmare. At this time, the body of the void nightmare exuded a terrifying black whirlwind, which also meant that the contract between it and Xiao Hua was reached. Although he had lost nearly 1/5 of his blood essence, Xiao Hua's face was still cold. He raised his hand and pinched his fingers, and mysterious black runes flashed behind him. Devour Musian's dream, and your mission will be completed. As the voice fell, the wind howled, and the space was torn open in a corner out of thin air. The nightmare drilled into the void with a cold breath. Xiao Hua's legs softened and he knelt directly on the ground, gasping for breath. After paying the price on his side, this void nightmare will also complete his commission. This time, even if you don't die, don't think about breaking through the refining god realm in the future. Xiao Hua sneered quickly, his tone full of ease and relief. Although he had been struggling for a long time whether to summon the void nightmare, after today's battle with Bairuoxi, he finally made up his mind. If you offend someone you shouldn't offend, you'd better disappear as soon as possible. At the same time, Musian had just returned to the villa, and the whole villa seemed quite quiet at this time. That's right, there is still a second competition today, and Bairuoxi's victory in this competition is of great significance. Canghai Peak will naturally express something, so she was sent to Canghai Peak. Musian first went to the kitchen slowly to prepare a sumptuous afternoon snack, and then came to Lin Ling's room. After raising his hand and knocking on the door, he waited at the door for a while, but there was no response from the room. "Sister Lin Ling." Musian called softly. Although Lin Ling lives in Tianhe Garden, she is not in Tianhe Garden every day. She is often seen like a dragon. Since leaving her cave, it is not an exaggeration to say that the major main peaks are in chaos. There is no one flying in the sky, swimming in the water, or running on the ground who has not been harmed. Although the elder chief was a little annoyed, he was also relieved. Lin Ling was the sect's divine beast, and had followed the sect master for tens of thousands of years. She ate those foods, which was a fairy fate for them. But, Lin Ling didn't like to eat raw food, and didn't know how to cook, so people have always been curious about who was cooking for Lin Ling. Musian was not sure whether Lin Ling was in the house. If not, she must be in Lianji Peak, and he would have to go to Lianji Peak later. At present, everyone in the sect knew the relationship between him and Qingdi. If someone wanted to deal with him, they would not dare to do it in front of Qingdi. Even if he was so angry that he lost his mind, he would definitely wait for a suitable opportunity. Qingdi was at the ascension platform, and he returned alone, which was a suitable opportunity. However, there was more than one protector around Musian. People from other states naturally wouldn't know about this. Lin Ling. When Musian was about to knock on the door again, the door suddenly opened. Lin Ling, wearing a plain white dress, was lying alone in front of the windowsill, her full chest pressing on the table, her silver hair scattered on her back, and her white feet swinging. After noticing Musian's presence, Lin Ling just glanced at him and then silently withdrew her gaze. Then, 3 big words appeared on the ground: "Who are you?" Lin Ling is a very emotional girl. When she is happy, she will call you AAA. If you tease her, she will not be annoyed because she knows that you are doing it out of kindness. In the Hedeo realm, there is probably only Linling who is as simple as a little girl. And now that she has been forgotten by Musian for several days, Linling is naturally unhappy. Although she goes out to find food every day and has her company, she still feels lonely sometimes. Musian calmly put down the plate and said with a smile, "Sorry, but I think Sister Linling should also know about the recent Ascension Conference. I have been busy for the Ascension Conference these days, and only today I have time to prepare snacks for you." Linling glanced at Musian, snorted lightly, held her cheek with her hand, turned her face away and didn't want to pay attention to him. But Musian persuaded her, and with the temptation of snacks, Linling's eyebrows soon relaxed gradually, and she reached out to pick up a small piece of ice cream and bit it gently in her mouth. A. The gradual melting in the mouth also made Linling's face reveal a joyful expression, and she began to move her chopsticks happily. She thought about it, and quickly stuffed a small piece of cake from the plate into his arms, and wrote on the table, "Give you some, eat it when you are hungry during your practice at night." "Thank you, but I won't be hungry," Musian politely refused. After sending snacks, Linling's mood obviously improved a lot, and Musian didn't bother him much. He just mentioned that someone might attack him in the near future and hoped to help take care of him. Then, he left the room without disturbing Linling, planning to meditate for a while. After all, if you stay next to Linling, what should you do if you scare people? "Are you coming?" Nearly half an hour later, Musian suddenly heard a terrifying howling wind that seemed to be faintly coming from the void. He slowly opened his eyes. The space in the room seemed to fluctuate vaguely. Whoosh! Then, from within that space, an eye seemed to open suddenly, just like a giant dragon opening its beastly eyes. From the beast's eyes, an invisible creature was rushing out. After working on it for a long time, it turned out to be similar to Gu Boxing's dream killing technique that day. It's really disappointing. After looking at it for a few times, Musian couldn't help but chuckle. Knowing that Linling was secretly watching over him, he naturally had nothing to fear. No, this doesn't seem to be a dream-killing technique, but a nightmare. Musian suddenly noticed this special feature. At the moment when the void nightmare rushed out of the space, he seemed to have thought of something interesting, and then took out the 8 Desolations dream map. The terrifying evil wind was powerful, like thousands of troops. The nightmare in the void opened its weird eyes and stared at Musian. However, as the 8 Desolations dream map unfolded, the void nightmare seemed to be stunned for a moment. It tilted its head slightly, blinked its only eye, and stared straight at the 8 Desolations dream map unfolded by Musian. Then, the weird eyes lit up. The aura of a born Taoist fetus. Although there is not much intelligence, nightmares like to eat dreams, and the 8 Desolations dream map can continuously create dreams, and there is even aura cultivated by the innate Tao fetus. For creatures like nightmares, the 8 Desolations dream map is the ultimate treasure. A dark and strange black mist emanated from the body of the void nightmare. The billowing black mist was full of mystery, but the eyes were shining like never before. Musian looked at this nightmare floating in mid-air, like a needle prick, and said with a smile, "You are quite smart." The 8 Desolations dream picture slowly descended from mid-air and unfolded quietly. In the picture, thousands of dreams appeared silently, causing the body of the void nightmare to continuously emit a black mist of excitement. "I thought it was a dream-killing technique, but I didn't expect it to be a nightmare, and it looks like a nightmare that can travel through the void. This Xiaohua is really capable." Musian's smile was a little more interesting, and he calmly looked at the creature in front of him. He generously extended his hand towards the void nightmare and said with a smile, "If you use it for me, these are all yours." He was not worried that this nightmare would reject him or attack him. After all. Musian glanced at the window sill. Linling held the plate, blinked her clear red eyes while eating the pastries, and tilted her head in front of the windowsill to look at Nightmare. At this moment, the void Nightmare seemed to have fallen into petrification, staring at Musian with blinking eyes, and then looked at the 8 Desolations dream picture in front of him. Buzz. Its body suddenly trembled violently, and then, a black light burst out from its eyes and entered Musian's spiritual consciousness. The master-slave contract, the void Nightmare, who is not very intelligent now, finally succumbed to the 8 Desolations dream map after a short period of thinking. After Musian felt the master-slave contract reflected in his mind, an intriguing smile appeared on his face. So he had already said that these chosen ones were all very precious treasure-hunting rats. He looked at this creature that was looking at him eagerly after signing the contract, as if it couldn't wait to enter the 8 Desolations dream map, and said with a smile, "Don't worry, I will raise you until you are fat and white from now on. But before that, I still need you to act in a play with me." To do this, he needed to first ask Yekingzin about spiritual practice. An hour later. "Senior Ye, I will take my leave first and come to visit you another day." In the main hall, Mu Jian had just finished asking Yekingzin some questions about practice, and then stood up to leave. "Your aura seems to be a little more vain than yesterday. Although talent is one of the foundations of practice, you must also remember not to indulge in trivial matters in the outside world and forget the fundamentals. Most of the geniuses I have seen in the past are because of pride. Fall through indulgence," Yekingzin taught. After these days of getting along with each other, the more Yekingzin looked at Musian, the more pleasing she became. After Musian told her what he had done in his fantasy that day, she looked away. At this moment, looking at the extremely respectful young man who raised his hands in front of her, Yekingzin couldn't help but wake up appropriately. When she was guiding Musian's practice, she noticed the flow of spiritual energy in his cauldron. At this moment, she could naturally see that the spiritual energy in Musian's body was much weaker than before. You don't need to think about it to know that it must be caused by the double cultivation with King Di yesterday. He was clearly in the god-refining realm and didn't help Qing Emperor that much. Qing Emperor should know this truth, but in the end, Qing Emperor still took action. However, Musian was originally King Di's Taoist companion, so it was naturally hard for her to say anything. "I know, thank you for your enlightenment," Musian responded solemnly and listened to Yekingzin's advice with an open mind. Of course, listening is listening. Sometimes Musian really wants to go to bed, but now more often, he can't help himself. Yekingzin nodded slightly, becoming more and more satisfied with Musian. Although her spiritual consciousness is weak now, she can still detect that the spiritual energy in Musian's natural furnace is much less than yesterday, so she can naturally guess it. The reason why she reminded Musian to work hard to practice instead of being obsessed with King Di is just for his sake, and there is no other thought. Looking at Musian's figure who was about to leave, Yekingzin also retracted her sight and was about to close her eyes to rest. "Has your natural furnace changed?" At this moment, Yekingzin seemed to have noticed something, and her eyes were fixed on Musian's back, as if she saw the natural furnace through his body. Musian stopped abruptly and looked back. Yekingzin stood up from the chair and walked down the steps, wearing a black and red long dress with the hem dragging on the ground. She walked to the front of the palace door with a graceful demeanor. Her fiery red figure was out of this world, and there seemed to be dots of red gold flames dancing in her hair, naturally falling to her calves. If Yao Men was a fairy with a fairy-like figure, then Yekingzin was more like a witch walking out of the flames, pure and charming. Finally, she walked on the red carpet in front of Musian, and noticed the intoxicated look in Musian's eyes at a glance. "Does it look good?" Yekingzin's cold voice sounded. If Musian had dared to look at her like this before, he would probably have been punished by her. However, there was no displeasure in Yekingzin's red eyes, but surprise and joy were dancing in her red eyes. Musian came back to his senses and sighed sincerely, "Senior's appearance is really stunning." At this time, If he said that he dared not offend the senior, it would seem hypocritical, and it would be difficult to narrow the distance between him and Ye Qingxin, so it would be better to be frank. Hearing this, Ye Qingxin couldn't help but smile, with a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. I see that your natural furnace seems to be different from yesterday, and it seems to be gradually expanding, she asked casually, but her eyes were fixed on Musian's eyes. She had confirmed Musian's natural furnace before, and the natural furnace at that time was clearly only at the level of returning to the void realm, but now, this natural furnace is gradually expanding. Although this change is extremely subtle because Musian has not yet refined the Dao heart pill, it still can't hide it from her eyes. Really, nothing can be hidden from the senior. Last night, Sister Kingdi gave me a Dao heart pill. Musian did not hide it and answered truthfully. And Ye Qingxin heard the words, and her eyes were also a little more interested. She naturally knew the effect of dioxin pill, but she didn't expect Kingdi to act so quickly and actually sent all dioxin pills to Musian. After refining dioxin pill in the future, your Tiansheng furnace will probably be comparable to the peak of returning to the void, close to enlightenment, Ye Qingxin said faintly. But you don't seem to have refined it yet. Have you encountered any bottleneck? Ye Qingxin asked. Hearing this, Musian couldn't help but smile bitterly. To be honest, the way to refine dioxin pill is not as simple as normal pills. I am still a little confused about how to refine it. Musian didn't lie about this. Dioxin pill is different from ordinary pills. After all, normal pills are refined by cauldrons, while dioxin pills have to be integrated into the Tiansheng furnace. The refining method is naturally different from that of normal pills. If I can meet Senior Luo Tan, I think I will know how to refine it. I am thinking about whether I can meet Senior Luo Tan later. Ye Qingxin pondered for a moment and smiled. In this case, I will make the decision for you and invite her to come. It happens that I have something to trade with her. Musian hesitated for a long time before bowing his head sincerely to thank him. Thank you very much, Senior. But when he bowed his head, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up a faint arc. The good show is about to begin. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 350. Musian left Tianhe Garden, while Lin Ling on the other side was chewing the only remaining meat bun. Then, she seemed to think of something and turned her head to look in the direction of Shenxiantai. Musian was attacked today. The Qing Emperor on Shenxiantai at the moment probably didn't know. The simple Miss Linglong didn't think much about it. After thinking for a moment, she decided to tell her about it in advance. Lin Ling opened her mouth slightly and whispered something. South Bank, Shenxiantai. The ability of saying what comes true is very special, and because Musian has been given a heavenly aura now, Lin Ling doesn't need to suppress the heavenly aura as hard as in the past, and the restrictions are not so great. If it was in the past, she would naturally not be able to use the ability of saying what comes true casually. As Lin Ling spoke, Yao Meng heard Lin Ling's voice in front of the Shenxiantai on the other side. Someone secretly sent a void nightmare to attack, but he was subdued instead. Yao Meng couldn't help but narrow her eyes. Although she didn't know the ins and outs of the matter, her eyes were already a little colder at this time. As early as the day when she saw Musian being attacked and killed in the Yaokai Holy Land, this matter had become Yao Meng's bottom line. And now she is in Lianji sect, and someone dares to attack him secretly? When she thought of this, Yao Meng was no longer in the mood to stay here. She closed her eyes slightly, and her spiritual consciousness swept through the Lianji sect at that moment. Then, she slowly opened her beautiful eyes and looked at a certain direction on the south bank, with her eyebrows slightly raised. Why did he go to find Ye Qingxin again? Thinking about it, even though Lin Ling said that Musian had no problems, Yao Meng still stood up and turned into a green light and left the ascension platform. Musian, who was waiting for a good show, naturally didn't know what happened in front of the ascension platform. Xiao Hua is Luo Tan's man, and that void nightmare is also a creature summoned by Xiaohua. This void nightmare likes to eat dreams and can freely travel through the void. Even the Hedeo great power is difficult to capture without precautions. It is no wonder that Xiaohua has such confidence that Muzian may be in trouble this time. And the previous void nightmare also reached a contract with Xiaohua, intending to devour Muzian's dreams. Before the goal is not achieved, this contract is not over. But Xiaohua didn't expect that Muzian's dream is far more than one, and his protector is more than one. Now the contract between the void nightmare and Xiaohua has been reached, but it is not Muzian's dream, but the dream in Muzian's 8 desolate dream map. And now that the chosen son has a flaw, Muzian naturally does not intend to let him go. After Muzian chatted with Yekingzin for a while in the hall, he noticed a milky white light quietly descending outside the hall door. Then, the white light turned into a graceful figure, and a woman in a luxurious and complicated white dress soon appeared in the hall. Daiye, you actually have something to ask me, which is rare. Luo Tan's eyes swept across the hall, stayed on Muzian for a moment, then retracted his gaze and smiled. Junior Muzian, meet the senior. Muzian reacted and raised his hand to bow. After I came down to the world, I actually thought about meeting the Medicine Emperor, but there was no suitable opportunity. Until today, after you traded with the Green Emperor, Xiao Mu happened to be a little confused about the Dao heart pill and wanted to ask you a few questions, so I planned to tell you all at once. Yekingzin said with a smile, and then invited Luo Tan to take a seat. Young friend Mu, please sit down too. Don't be so reserved. Medicine King and I are not the kind of people who care so much about worldly etiquette, Yekingzin said with a smile. After the three of them sat down, Luo Tan looked up at Yekingzin and said with a smile, fellow Daoist, yes, spiritual consciousness seems to be a little weaker than before. It must be because of helping young friend Mu speed up the refining of the elixir that day. Could it be that you invited me here this time for this? It must be said that this is indeed an elegant and noble woman. The Shenjiao immortal dynasty of Yuzhou was founded by her. In the 9 provinces, there are countless people who know Luo Tan and even want to get to know him. However, since the person he is facing is an ascender from the heavenly court, Luo Tan naturally does not have any contempt for him. Yekingzin shook her head and said, although my spiritual consciousness is a little weaker than before, it is not a big deal. I did not ask Yao Huang to come here for this matter. Besides, Muzian's natural furnace is slowly advancing with the Dao heart pill. Once the natural furnace is expanded, it can nourish the spiritual consciousness. Yekingzin quickly gathered her thoughts and said, in fact, I asked Yao Huang to come here because I want you to refine a taking pill, and secondly, friend Mu is still a little confused about the refining method of Dao heart pill. When he said this, Yekingzin looked at Muzian with a meaningful look in his eyes. Even I don't have some of the medicinal materials needed for taking pill. Friend Ye should know how rare it is. Luo Tan raised his eyebrows slightly and couldn't help but speak. Taking pill, after taking this pill, it can purify the meridians. It is no exaggeration to say that it can transform one's body. Muzian has naturally heard of this pill before, but the medicinal materials it needs are extremely scarce. Even those great powers may not be able to gather these medicinal materials. Moreover, they, who are in the Hedeo realm, do not need this kind of pill at all, so naturally they did not collect medicinal materials on purpose. I have prepared 2 of each of the pills needed for taking pill. The Medicine King only needs to refine 1. Yekingzin took out a jade slip from the ring. This can be said to be very clear. The second batch of medicinal materials is Luo Tan's reward. Hearing this, Luo Tan hesitated for a moment, and finally accepted the commission with pleasure. After all, this is a favor in itself. She is also somewhat interested in the matter of the heavenly court. Before the next immortal road, she will inevitably ask Yekingzin for help. After accepting the jade slip containing medicinal materials, The Empress of the Holy Moon Immortal Dynasty smiled and looked at the silent boy on the side. The Green Emperor asked me to refine the Deo heart pill before, but it turned out that it was finally taken and refined by Mu Xiao. Her eyes were full of surprise, fully showing what the self-cultivation of the queen of the film is. She naturally knew that the Green Emperor wanted this Deo heart pill for Muzian, but she had racked her brains these days and couldn't figure out why the Green Emperor wanted Muzian to take the Deo heart pill. Could it be that the Green Emperor has such confidence that Muzian can bring out the medicinal effect of Deoxin pill and expand the cauldron? To answer your question, I did take Deoxin pill, but I haven't refined it yet. Muzian said this with a helpless look on his face. Luo Tan didn't seem surprised and smiled. Deoxin pill is different from other pills. Only some special cauldrons can refine it. After most cultivators take Deoxin pill, this pill will only turn into ordinary spiritual energy and have no effect. Only some special cauldrons can bring out the true effect of this pill. Senior, do you know how to refine this pill faster? I still want to try it, Muzian asked humbly. Ordinary cultivators can refine it by themselves by turning on the cauldron and absorbing the pill into it, Luo Tan explained with a smile. When she said this, she also had a meaningful smile on her face, and continued faintly, if you have a special physique, or a twin cauldron, you can circulate the spiritual energy for several cycles, and then you can also refine the Deo heart pill. When he said this, Luo Tan secretly looked at Muzian a few more times, as if he had some doubts. Ye Qingxin raised her eyebrows inadvertently, and changed the subject lightly. Thank you for the help of the Medicine King today, I owe you a favor. With Ye Qingxin's attention diversion, Luo Tan's eyes moved away from Muzian, and chatted with Ye Qingxin, who was smiling. For her, Muzian certainly had some secrets that made people care, but the more important thing was Ye Qingxin's favor. Buzz. Just as the two were still chatting, there was a terrifying turbulence in the void, and ripples were rippling. Who? Muzian's face changed slightly, and he suddenly got up from his chair, looking at the space in front of him in fear, which seemed to be shattered in an instant. A strange creature rushed out from the space, opened its huge and strange eyes, stared at Muzian closely, and a black blade burst out from its eyes. Muzian had no time to dodge, and the black blade had already pierced his arm, as if it was going to swallow him. Muzian only felt a slight tingling sensation from the front of his shoulder. He stumbled back, holding his shoulder, his lips pale. How dare you? In front of the two Hedeo realm masters, someone dared to attack Muzian. Not to mention Ye Qingxin, who was always protective of his shortcomings. Even Luo Tan's face turned cold in an instant, and he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Boom! A violent sound exploded from the body of the Void Nightmare, but the nightmare was extremely cunning. At the moment of attacking Muzian, it had already drilled into the space. However, the Void Nightmare did not seem to notice. When it entered the void, Luo Tan had already locked onto it. She raised her hand and was about to grab the Void Nightmare. Senior, please hold back. However, at this moment, Muzian, who looked pale, suddenly raised his hand to hold Luo Tan down, took a half step forward, and stood in front of Ye Qingxin. The turbulence in the void had ended. The nightmare came and went quickly. When Muzian raised his hand to stop the two, the hall had already returned to its previous quietness. However, the harmonious atmosphere just now had become a little more weird. Ye Qingxin looked indifferent, staring at the space where the Void Nightmare disappeared, and whispered to herself, Void Nightmare? Who is so vicious that he actually summoned this creature to attack him? Luo Tan's eyebrows also frowned inadvertently. She was dressed in a gorgeous and noble outfit. The white dress was embroidered with complicated golden cloud patterns. Such gorgeous dress set off her delicate face, revealing the Empress's elegance and indifferent attitude overlooking the world. At this time, she still had the indifferent attitude of the past, but in her pair of light golden beautiful eyes, there was a little more coldness. Why did you stop me just now, friend Mu? Luo Tan asked. Musian covered his shoulder, his face pale, raised his head and said weakly, the Void Nightmare seems to be sent by someone to attack the juniors. The two seniors are both powerful people in the Hedeo realm, and should be able to capture the direction where the Void Nightmare is fleeing at this moment. If we follow the clues later, I think we can find the owner of the Void Nightmare. The nightmare creature is somewhat similar to the demon cultivator, but this creature is even more unpleasant. For most cultivators in Jizhu, this creature is synonymous with evil. On the one hand, it looks too demonic, and on the other hand, the nightmare likes to eat dreams. Although it will not catch a person and fleece him, it is still unpleasant. And the Void Nightmare is one of the final forms of the nightmare. This creature can escape into the void, and ordinary cultivators can never catch it in the act. However, the two people present are both powerful beings in the Hedeo realm, and the Void Nightmare deliberately let it go. Naturally it is impossible not to find its location. I have locked the location of the nightmare, it can't escape. Ye Kingzin's tone was full of coldness, and he spoke indifferently. Dare to attack Musian in front of two Hedeo realms, this attack is not just Musian, but a slap in the face of the two powerful beings. Even if it is just a wisp of spiritual consciousness, the power of Hedeo cannot be provoked. Luo Tan looked at Musian deeply and said, young friend Mu has seen through it. Since this happened in front of me today, I can't just sit back and watch. Musian reluctantly raised his hand, hesitated for a moment, and said, thank you for your kindness, but, won't this cause you trouble? It doesn't matter. You and King Di are both Taoist companions, and you are favored by Taoist friend yet. You were attacked in front of me, so I can't just sit back and watch. At this point, she continued, you were attacked by the nightmare just now, and there are still some magic debris left in your body. You need to get rid of it first. As she said that, she reached out to grab Musian's hand, intending to help. Let me do it. Ye Kingzin seemed to remember something, raised her eyebrows slightly, and immediately raised her hand to stop him. Musian seemed to have some magic weapon on his body that could block the breath of the natural furnace. There was no problem just from the surface. But if Luo Tan directly removed the magic debris from Musian's body, it would be impossible for him not to notice the natural furnace. However, before Ye Kingzin could stop him, Luo Tan had already grabbed Musian's wrist and said, Dai's real body is not in Jizhu, and his spiritual consciousness is a little damaged. Let me do it. Seeing that Ye Kingzin stopped talking, Luo Tan's spiritual consciousness also swept through Musian's body to confirm where the magic debris left by the previous Void Nightmare was now in Musian's body. He has a good physique and is a good seedling for cultivation. But it seems that he wasted some time in his childhood. As his spiritual consciousness swept through Musian's body, Luo Tan couldn't help but nod slightly, secretly evaluating Musian's talent level. As King Di's Taoist companion, Musian was naturally curious about what attracted King Di. At this moment, although Musian's talent was top-notch, King Di should not only be interested in his talent. Maybe they are in love with each other. Luo Tan thought about this and soon noticed the magic debris in Musian's body. Just as she began to remove the magic debris in Musian's body, Luo Tan was stunned again. No. There is more than one cauldron in his body? As a natural cauldron, Luo Tan naturally knew what this meant. Although she had already guessed it, when she really confirmed this fact, her face still changed a little, and she was even a little surprised. This Musian's body is not only a natural furnace, but also the spiritual energy in the heaven. Luo Tan looked at Musian calmly, and soon withdrew his hand, and said naturally, the magic debris has been removed. I think you can fully recover after 2 or 3 days of rest. Hearing this, Musian raised his hands and clasped his fists, and said respectfully, thank you for your help, seniors. I will remember it in my heart. After saying that, he continued, the spiritual energy in my body is disordered. I need to meditate and adjust it myself first. I hope the two seniors will forgive me. Luo Tan nodded slightly, watching Musian meditating and adjusting the disordered spiritual energy in his body, and she also looked at Ye Qingxin with a somewhat inexplicable look. This ancestor of the Ye family just wanted to suppress the nightmare in the void. At this moment, his graceful body seemed to be covered with a layer of red gold flames, and the center of the flames was black, like a rosy glow, like a fairy descending to the world. Fellow Daoist Ye has known about this for a long time, right? Luo Tan asked. What did the medicine emperor say? Ye Qingxin smiled softly. Although she seemed confused, she still knew the meaning of Luo Tan's words. You should know what I am talking about, Luo Tan said faintly. Ye Qingxin had known Musian earlier than she did, so it was impossible for her not to know the secret of Musian. As for the Green Emperor, I'm afraid she knew about this a long time ago. I didn't expect that there are male cultivators in this world who are born furnaces and cauldrons, and even have something to do with the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. I only learned about this in the past few days. Ye Qingxin looked at the Empress of Yuzhou, her beautiful eyes like rubies, showing a very indifferent expression. But her eyebrows were inadvertently wrinkled. Luo Tan seemed to have shown an interest in the natural furnace cauldron just now. This is not a good thing. Luo Tan glanced at the young man who was meditating with his eyes closed, and continued, I wonder if the Green Emperor knows about this. Ye Qingxin was about to speak, and at this moment, a soft and pleasant voice came from the front of the palace door. Why do you two care so much about my Taoist partner? The Hedao realm is already the peak, and no matter how good the natural furnace is, it doesn't mean much, right? Accompanied by a voice like an immortal sound in the hall, a slender green figure came into the hall at the door of the hall. She was wearing a fluttering green skirt, her skin was white, and her body was like a fairy, but there was a kind of hazy beauty that was not real. Did Qing Emperor also notice the abnormality here? Luo Tan said in surprise. Yao Meng glanced at the pale-faced Musian who was meditating over there, and said in a sweet and calm tone, I don't know, but looking at it like this, I think something happened just now. Although she was smiling, her eyes were already a bit colder. Someone summoned the void nightmare before and attacked Xiao Mu, but fortunately it was not serious. When Luo Tan said this, he looked at the fairy in front of him with a somewhat meaningful look. Fairy Yao Meng has really gone far enough with this step. Naturally, the natural cauldron in the God-refining realm is of little use, but given time, will Musian return to the void, or even achieve enlightenment? At that time, who could guarantee that the Tian furnace cauldron would not increase in the Dao realm? The relationship between me and him is not just because of the natural furnace. Yao Meng quickly calmed down the coldness in his eyes and said with a smile, I value everything about him, not just his natural calculus. Hearing this, Luo Tan became a little more doubtful, and couldn't help but ask, even if it's heavenly aura, doesn't the fairy care about it? Nature. Yao Meng came to Musian's side lightly, with a little more tenderness in his eyes. What I value is not just his natural cauldron, but everything he has. He has sacrificed for me once in the past, so no matter who hurt him, I will not easily bypass it. Yao Meng raised his fingertips and looked at the green lotus petals resting gracefully in his hand. The green lotus petal turned into a butterfly in the next moment, an invisible thread pointing to a certain hall on the south bank. Yao Meng also noticed the aura of the void nightmare just now. Thinking of Linglong's previous words, Yao Meng naturally paid more attention and attached a petal of the pure green lotus to the void nightmare. At this moment, the location of the nightmare in the void has already appeared through the butterfly. Luo Tan seemed to have noticed something. She slowly raised her head, following the invisible thread, her beautiful eyes gradually focused on the hall where she was. At this time, the flawless and exquisite face of Empress Luo Tan was already covered with frost. This void nightmare actually went to her hall. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 351. Nightmare of the Void. This creature is cunning by nature, and can tear open cracks in space and travel freely through the void. Therefore, let alone ordinary monks, even the land gods who have returned to the void realm have a headache when they see this creature. And because of its scarcity, most monks may not be able to see such one in their lifetime. In Xiaohua's previous life, he secretly cultivated such a creature that could travel through the void. It's enough to imagine how much effort he spent on it. Of course, Musian naturally does not know these things, and he is not interested in caring about Xiaohua's past and present life at the moment. Where did this void nightmare go? Why do the seniors feel that their expressions are not right? Musian slowly opened his eyes, his expression full of surprise and confusion. But with a somewhat interesting smile in his heart, he was waiting for the show to begin. With the Medicine King's methods, he will definitely not attack a monk who has just entered the god-refining realm. I wonder who lives in the palace where the Medicine King is. Yao Meng noticed the faint turmoil in the void coming from a certain hall in the distance, and then his green eyes fell on Luo Tan, and asked quietly. From the day when Musian came back from the dead, she had decided to protect Musian secretly, and even planned to stay in Musian's natural furnace after reshaping her immortal body. Unexpectedly, the original witch got there first. This incident made Yao Meng's indifferent character feel depressed, but now there are people who dare to attack him after she announced her relationship with Musian. This hit the Qing Emperor and the Yaokai Holy Land in the face. Not to mention Ye Qingxin and Luo Tan, the person behind the void nightmare attacked Musian in front of them. Such an action completely ignored the two powerful Hedao experts. Even though none of them are real bodies, even if it is a ray of spiritual consciousness, the other party's actions are still provoking the majesty of Hedao. It was precisely because of this that they accepted Musian's suggestion and planned to catch the person behind the void nightmare. However, now the three of them discovered that this void nightmare had actually run into the main hall where Luo Tan lived. Besides me, the only people living in the hall are my personal maids. In another villa next to the hall, the saint live there, Luo Tan said coldly and quietly. Young friend Mu, you can rest assured. If it is really my men who attack you, I will definitely give you an explanation later. The Empress of Yuzhou, who was wearing a white dress and had a gorgeous temperament, turned to look at Musian, who reluctantly stood up, but her lips were still a little white, and said solemnly. Not only to find the murderer, but more importantly to give Musian an explanation. There will be an alchemy competition after this, and for this alchemy competition, Luo Tan was already very fond of Ye Lingxian before the competition started. The physique of the natural spirit body is very suitable for the way of alchemy, and the Empress Luo Tan is a person who loves talents. Ye Lingxian respects Musian so much that she even calls him Brother Mu. Then naturally she would have to give him an explanation no matter what. Whether it's for Ye Lingxian or the Tiansheng furnace. Musian's face was pale, but he still did not forget the etiquette. He raised his hands and bowed, and said in a weak tone, I believe His Majesty Luo Tan, so please. Musian's weakness at the moment was certainly not an act. If he wanted to deceive the eyes of the Hedao power, even if it was just a wisp of spiritual consciousness in the Hedao realm, he would have to fake it. Don't you Xiaohua want to sneak attack me? Then I'll give you a chance to sneak attack. It's just that we have to attack in front of you, the Empress of Yuzhou. Luo Tan's expression softened a little, and he felt more favorable towards Musian's attitude. I would like to see who did it. Then, her tone suddenly became much colder, and she turned her head to look at Ye Qingxin and Qingdi, and said, which of the two fellow Taoists will go with me? I think if I go by myself, you won't worry either. Under normal circumstances, Yao Menglai would be very worried if he knew that Musian was injured. However, For some reason, she was surprisingly not too worried this time. Although she had an angry look on her face before, now she looked at Musian with a bit of resentment in her eyes. After Musian almost looked at her for the first time, he smiled apologetically at her. The two looked at each other, then looked away knowingly. Let's go together and find out who did it. Yao Meng's tone was soft and calm, and then he gave Musian a meaningful look. When Ye Qingxin heard this, she shook her head and said, "It should be enough for you to go together. Little friend Mu was attacked just today and someone needs to stay to protect him." She actually saw that although Musian was slightly injured, it was not serious, and that staying here was not entirely to protect the law, but had other deep meanings. "I think fellow Daoist Ye should go with us. He is always accompanied by a maid with top-notch strength and talent. I just used 1,000-mile teleportation to send her over, and she is now at the door." Yao Meng had a slight smile on his face and a clear and sweet voice, but he decisively rejected Ye Qingxin. This Qing emperor was not a good person, and he was very aware of NIC prevention. Naturally, he felt the change in Ye Qingxin's attitude towards Musian. And this change also made her a little more wary. Yao Meng is good in everything, but she is very strict against the big sharks in the Hedao realm, not giving them a chance to enter the fish pond. Musian felt a little regretful, but did not show it on his face. Since Fairy Yao Meng said so, let's go there together. Ye Qingxin heard it, and it was difficult to say anything else, and finally accepted the invitation of the Green Emperor. Her body was burning with red gold flames, like a witch in fire, just in time to complement the cold and fairy-like Yao Meng beside her. The next moment, Luo Tan and the Green Emperor had turned into a ray of light and disappeared in the hall first. Ye Qingxin's body was also burning with red gold flames, but before leaving, she inadvertently glanced at Musian with a teasing smile in her eyes. "You are really brave." This sentence seemed to have some unclear meaning, but Musian understood the meaning of her words. He raised his hands and clasped his fists helplessly, saying, "I didn't intend to plot against you, but I was indeed attacked secretly. Sister Qingdi was not here at the time, so I had to come to you." The people present had lived for tens of thousands of years, so they naturally knew about Musian's plot. Ye Qingxin had just come to her, and a series of things happened, such as Musian coming to her, and the exposure of the Tiansheng furnace's advancement, and then Musian stopped them from solving the void nightmare. So many things put together, she naturally guessed something. The three people present knew this tacitly. Ye Qingxin knew, Luo Tan also guessed, and the look that Qingdi just gave Musian, she knew it without thinking, and she also knew it. Musian didn't think that this plan would be watertight or even invisible from the beginning. But so what? The facts are in front of us. The void nightmare is indeed a creature summoned by Xiao Hua, and it is indeed instructed by Xiao Hua. In addition, there are many doubts about Xiao Hua, so Luo Tan can't protect him. The final result is like this, and the process is no longer important. As for Luo Tan and Ye Qingxin's dissatisfaction with his play afterwards, there may be some, but it won't be big. There is no need to say more about Luo Tan. If it is really the people she brought to attack Musian, she will naturally punish him severely. If it is revealed that Xiao Hua is no longer the real Xiao Hua, this Medicine King should thank him instead. What's more, he is a natural furnace, and Luo Tan now also knows about the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. Even if it is the Hedao realm, it is impossible not to attach importance to the spiritual energy from the heavenly court. As for Ye Qingxin's side, I am not blaming you, but you can tell me some things directly, and you don't need to hide them deliberately. Ye Qingxin looked at Musian, who was helpless and apologetic, and his voice softened a little, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but raise a faint arc. Since you are half of the Ye family, if someone deliberately makes things difficult for you, I will naturally not sit idly by. Musian's eyes were touched. Senior is so kind to me. Ye Qingxin nodded slightly. The red gold flame on her body was burning, and the next moment, her charming figure turned into a flame and disappeared in the hall. The black and red interwoven dress danced with the wind, and her full chest seemed to sway gently, which made Musian sigh secretly. Ruoxi really met her match. At the same time, in a hall on the south bank, when Xiao Hua opened his eyes and saw the void nightmare appear in front of him, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. The void nightmare will not stop until it achieves its goal. Although it has consumed 1/5 of its essence this time, and even its lifespan has been damaged, but it doesn't matter. After all, he was a great man in his previous life, and in the world where he is, he can also call the wind and rain. The loss of these 10 years of lifespan, as long as the soul is refined and the lifespan increases, these 10 years of lifespan is nothing at all. Even the woman I like dares to attack, it can only be considered bad luck. Xiao Hua sneered secretly, and was about to raise his hand to make the void nightmare leave this place and erase the last evidence. In this way, this matter has nothing to do with him. Even if the protector behind Musian wants to track down the real murderer, it is impossible to find it. However, no. Why? I can't control the void nightmare. When did it sign a master-servant contract with others? After Xiao Hua was about to order the void nightmare to leave, he found that the creature had no movement at all. After a brief hesitation, his face became ugly. At this moment, the face of this great man who had seen many storms in his previous life could not help but change slightly, and he felt that it was not good. You know, using the void nightmare to attack Musian was originally considered that this technique was difficult to be detected by others. If the void nightmare refused to leave by itself, and if it was traced to him later. At this moment, Xiao Hua seemed to have sensed the danger coming, and raised his head suddenly, just in time to see that the only eye of the void nightmare actually shot out a dark mark, which was directly imprinted on his spiritual consciousness. A special mark of nightmare appeared on his forehead, as if he was afraid that others would not know that he had used the curse-killing technique before. Why? Why did this void nightmare not listen to my orders at all? Xiao Hua roared in his heart, full of fear and uneasiness. Then, his heart skipped a beat. Thinking of the various performances and reactions of the void nightmare just now, Xiao Hua's face suddenly changed drastically. Thinking of something, he whispered almost word by word. Musian. The void nightmare became out of his control after attacking Musian, and the nightmare just now actually left the mark of the nightmare on him. Once the news that Musian was injured by the nightmare attack spread, the ending of him who summoned the void nightmare now can be imagined. This boy's scheming is deeper than I thought. Although I don't know how he subdued the void nightmare, I can't stay in the Lianji sect now. When Xiao Hua thought of this, his heart was full of despair. That being said, he had just been defeated by Ruoxi today, and his spiritual consciousness was severely damaged. In addition, he had just sacrificed his essence, and now he can be said to be so weak that he can't walk at all. In this case, how can he escape? Is it possible that my life has just begun, and I will die here before I even set foot on the top of the mountain? I will not resign myself to this. At this moment, Xiao Hua's mind was working at a high speed, and then his eyes suddenly lit up. Oh, that ancient treasure map fragment. Not long ago, he obtained a treasure map fragment of the ancient ruins under the Thunder Tribulation, and that treasure map fragment can store other people's spiritual consciousness. The nightmare mark just now was branded on his spiritual consciousness. As long as he hid his spiritual consciousness in the treasure map fragment and pretended to be unconscious, even if he would be discovered, there would be no evidence. In the final analysis, as long as his spiritual consciousness was not destroyed, it didn't matter if this body was really gone later. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua made up his mind and raised his hand to slap his chest. His eyes went dark and he fainted directly in the hall, and that wisp of spiritual consciousness also entered the fragment of the treasure map. With the departure of the three great masters, the hall returned to silence. Wei Mengru had been beside Musian without knowing when. Through the conversation with him just now, she roughly knew the purpose of the young master. The cold maid immediately gave him a cold sidelong look and said coldly, "Is it worth it to make yourself like this just to solve an enemy?" As cold as before, the long hair like a waterfall was scattered on her back, and the floating skirt showed a pair of round and slender legs like jade, with picturesque eyebrows and bright eyes. And the eyes that glanced at Musian were full of displeasure. "Don't talk about this first, can you help me?" Musian stretched out his hand to Wei Mengru and smiled. The slightly pale lips and weak words made Wei Mengru bite her lip lightly, and finally she helped Musian to sit down in front of the chair beside her. "Sister Mengru, please sit here." Realizing Wei Mengru's intentional or unintentional gaze towards him, Musian gently patted the chair beside him, signaling Wei Mengru to sit over and accompany him. "My wound hurts so much, Sister Mengru." Seeing that Wei Mengru seemed angry and didn't want to pay attention to him, Musian covered his injured shoulder and acted pitiful. A trace of pity flashed across Wei Mengru's eyes, and finally she sat down beside him at Musian's suggestion. "Where is the injury?" After looking at him for a few times and being silent for a moment, Wei Mengru finally couldn't help but ask. Although her face was cold, her eyes seemed to flicker with a hint of heartache. "It's just some external injuries, it will recover in a day or two." When Musian spoke, his palm had intentionally or unintentionally wrapped around her slender waist, and smiled. "Sister Mengru, are you distressed? You deserve it, you don't have to get hurt." There was a bit of coldness in Wei Mengru's voice, but her heart was inexplicably rippled, her face was burning, and she turned her face away silently, only giving Musian a beautiful profile. "Even if Sister Kingdi and the others know that I am acting, I have to perform before this play can begin." Musian smiled. As for what the outcome of Xiaohua will be, he actually doesn't care much. After all, it doesn't matter whether Xiaohua will die this time. As long as Xiaohua's luck is suppressed, his luck can rise, which is enough. "Even so, you should be gentler on yourself," Wei Mengru said coldly. Musian didn't say anything, just hugged Wei Mengru's shoulders and let her lean on him. Wei Mengru struggled slightly in Musian's arms at first, but seemed to be afraid of affecting Musian's injury, and finally slowly leaned on his shoulder. And Musian's palm on her slender waist also changed from being honest and dutiful at the beginning to gradually becoming unscrupulous. Wei Mengru's pretty face was slightly red, and she glanced at the young master with resentment, and then lowered her eyes. At this moment, she seemed to have shed her former cold and arrogant, and became a well-behaved and obedient girl, immersed in the tenderness of her young master. After a while, Wei Mengru gently pressed Musian's hand on her leg and whispered, "Wait, wait, don't do this in the hall. How about we go back to Tianhe Garden now?" Musian leaned close to her ear and whispered. "If you don't worry about being discovered by others, it's up to you." Wei Mengru had already thought of a reason. Although her pretty face was flushed, her tone was full of indifference. Musian was choked and felt helpless for a moment. That's true. During the recent Immortal Ascension Conference, although everyone is often not in Tianhe Garden, it's hard to say when they will come back. And it's actually not bad to feel the warmth of Sister Mengru's body right now, especially when you see the cold and arrogant maid showing her charming look at this time. It's even more heartwarming. When Musian thought of this, his palm was about to move up along her waist. Wei Mengru sniffed the familiar smell on Musian's body, as if her frozen heart was quietly melting at this moment. Although she was a little worried about how to explain if someone came in and saw her being so intimate with her young master, she still slowly closed her eyes, her eyelashes trembling uneasily, enjoying this short warmth. After a long time, Musian stopped when he saw that it was good, and Wei Mengru lowered her head to tidy up her messy dress, with a faint blush on her cold face. Noticing Musian's teasing look, she gave him a look of disdain and quickly tidied her dress. Then, as if she suddenly thought of something, she turned her head and looked at Musian with suspicion. Come to think of it, I remember giving you a box of ointment before, but I don't think you ever used it. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 352. Ointment. Musian's eyes changed a little. That day, he wanted to use the ointment to cover the fragrance of other girls, but he went to Lianji Peak and had to give the ointment to his senior sister. Although Sister Mengru is a good maid who has no bad intentions and only cares about her master, if she knew about this, she would give him a haha and choose to surrender directly in the competition the next day, leaving him to fend for himself. The ointment is good, but it would be too tiring to hide the fragrance when getting along with Sister Mengru. Musian smiled and gently hugged Wei Mengru's soft waist. Wei Mengru glanced at Musian, and listened to Musian's words, but her appearance was still calm. She was cold and elegant, sitting upright, and her snow-white jade neck was faintly exposed. Although she was a maid, considering her identity as an original witch and her strength that was close to the return to Void Realm, she was a little more stern and cold. It is hard to imagine that such a woman would have a shy side. Although they have not practiced dual cultivation yet, they have almost finished everything except dual cultivation. Musian took Wei Mengru's slightly cool and soft little hand, feeling a little emotional. By the way, I will go to Tianqian City after the alchemy competition. What kind of ointment do you like? Musian asked. My physique is special and I can't be far away from you. If you go to Tianqian City at that time, I will naturally go with you. As for the ointment, let's see after this, Wei Mengru whispered. Musian understood in his heart, took her little hand and held it tightly, admiring the seductive appearance of the yellow skirt maid, waiting for good news from Luotan. Among the women Musian knew, each woman had a different temperament and appearance. If you had to compare them, they all had their own merits. Wei Mengru's advantage is her identity and her long legs like white jade. Although this yellow dress can't tell what her figure is like, it is not difficult to judge from her high and bulging chest that this woman is also a person of tolerance. Do you think Xiaohua will fall here after this time? Wei Mengru suddenly asked. After all, he is the son of heaven, so he won't die, but even if he doesn't die, he won't be much better after this time. Musian smiled. It's better to say that if he really dies, he will have one less person to take advantage of. I don't know if the heaven will choose the son of heaven again after Xiaohua's luck is squeezed out. Although Musian doesn't think Xiaohua will fall so easily, he is a great man in his previous life, and he can always think of a way to get out of trouble. After adjusting the spiritual energy for a while, Musian stood up and stretched his waist, saying, "Let's go and see, it's about time." Is your injury okay? Wei Mengru hesitated. Musian noticed Wei Mengru's gleaming eyes and couldn't help teasing, "Sister Mengru is really distressed, right?" I said, "You deserve it," Wei Mengru responded coldly. Then, he stretched out his hand to Musian and said lightly, "You are injured, I will take you, so that you won't be suspected by Ye Huang and others." Although it was intentional injury, since it was acting, then the play must be done well. If Musian jumped and flew to the sword, it would not be easy to explain. "Sister Mengru treats me so well." Musian sighed and said, seeing Wei Mengru's cold expression, he didn't care, and hugged her waist generously, with his chest against her back. "Are you going to take this opportunity to get rid of Xiaohua?" Wei Mengru summoned the flying sword, feeling the warm breath coming from behind. Her heart trembled for a while, but she maintained her usual high and cold attitude and tried to change the subject. In the past, she had no feelings for Musian's intimate contact, and just thought of him as a bug. But now that she has realized her feelings, even a simple action is embarrassing. "Xiaohua can't die yet, but we can take this opportunity to suppress his luck and damage the heavenly Dao," Musian said with a smile. "As long as the heavenly Dao is damaged, the future new heavenly Dao Yuanluo will have the opportunity to replace the 9 provinces heavenly Dao. And by then, he will be the only chosen one. If Xiaohua dies directly, it will not maximize the benefits. If nothing unexpected happens, we can still earn a favor after we go now, Musian continued. If it was Yeyu who attacked Musian, even if Yeyu was exposed afterwards, he would find a way to deny it. But Xiaohua is different. Xiaohua can only admit that he attacked Musian, or in other words, he has no choice. Hiding the spiritual consciousness is stupid, because he indirectly admits that he attacked Musian. But Xiaohua has no other way. Either admit that he attacked Musian, or reveal that he took over Xiaohua's body. The former may still be alive, but the latter, taking over someone else's body, is an evil technique. At this moment, when Luo Tan came to the hall first, he saw Xiaohua, who had fainted in the hall. In the hall, there was no trace of the void nightmare, but there were still traces of the void nightmare in the hall. His spiritual consciousness is very weak. Even if he was seriously injured in the battle with Biruoxi, he should not be so weak. Yao Meng saw the clue at a glance and spoke faintly. This is too coincidental. The void nightmare escaped to the hall where the medicine emperor lived, and the Yuzhou saint in the hall was unconscious. Ye Qingxin looked down at the unconscious young saint in front of her, but she was already certain in her heart. It was Xiaohua who attacked Musian. Luo Tan's brows frowned inadvertently, and her usually beautiful face became a bit colder. She could naturally tell that Musian deliberately put on such a show in front of them, but no matter what, Xiaohua was the biggest suspect at the moment. Looking down at the unconscious Xiaohua on the ground, Luo Tan's spiritual consciousness swept over his body. And this sweep made Luo Tan's eyes become much colder. Just as King Di said, Xiaohua's spiritual consciousness is too weak, so weak that it is almost imperceptible. If it hadn't been for the backlash from the nightmare of the void, it would have been impossible for him to be so weak. As Musian expected, although the void nightmare is now Musian's pet, Xiaohua must take the blame no matter what. Unless he wants to expose his spiritual consciousness to the three powerful men and accept their inspection to prove his innocence. But, what about after the inspection? Proving that the void nightmare is not what he summoned, it means exposing that he is no longer the real Xiaohua. It would not be a pity to die 10,000 times if you take another person's body. At the moment, Xiaohua has no choice but to become coma and indirectly admit that he is the attacker. I will give an explanation to Emperor Qing after this, Luo Tan said. No matter what happened today happened to someone on her side, and she had to give the other party an explanation no matter what. Xiaohua's current reaction is obviously caused by the backlash of the void nightmare, because at this moment, from the spiritual consciousness remaining in his body, he can still roughly detect some of the aura left by the void nightmare. In addition, his essence was also severely damaged, which was caused by feeding the void nightmare. However, Yao Meng obviously did not intend to give up and was about to speak again. At this time, a weak and tired voice suddenly came from behind the main hall. I didn't expect that it was Brother Xiao who did it. It's really surprising. Not far away, Mu Jian just came to the palace with his sword under the leadership of Wei Mengru. At this moment, his eyes seemed a little surprised, but also a little unexpectedly calm and indifferent, and his eyes fell directly on Xiaohua, who was directly unconscious. Hearing this, Luo Tan looked at Musian casually and said, when did little friend Mu become enemies with him? Logically speaking, how could a holy son of Yuzhou who had just arrived at Lianji sect become enemies with a person he had never met before, and even resorted to using secret techniques to sneak attack Musian? Musian smiled bitterly and said, if I have to say it, I have had some interactions with Miss Xiao Shuixian in the past 2 days, and Brother Xiao happened to catch this scene. With the character of the Holy Son, it is unlikely that someone would retaliate against you because of such a thing. Luo Tan frowned inadvertently, always feeling a little strange. This junior actually thinks so too, so I think today's matter can be put on hold for the time being, and we will make plans after the investigation is clear. Musian raised his hands and bowed respectfully, saying respectfully. You were attacked by this person, and now you have to defend him. Yao Meng, who was wearing a blue dress and looked like a fairy in a painting, looked at him quietly. Her beautiful green eyes met Musian's apologetic gaze, and her cold and beautiful face showed displeasure. I don't mean to leave this matter alone, but there are too many involved in this matter, so I hope we can investigate clearly before making a decision. Musian looked at Yao Meng with apologetic eyes. Yao Meng was stunned at first, and then a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. It should be said that she was a fairy who had accompanied Musian for several days and nights. She seemed to understand something quickly. Her moist lips slightly raised an imperceptible arc, and she said coldly, "Well, since you think I am too much if you are nosy, don't come to me again for such matters in the future." After she said that, she waved her sleeves and turned into a blue light and left the hall. You two don't need to quarrel over this matter. If it is indeed Xiao Hua's fault, I will definitely punish him severely. After this, Luo Ten couldn't help but say. Musian shook his head and said, "It is said that the holy son of Yuzhou is generous and decent. I think he is not the kind of person who would be jealous and revenge because of my interactions with his sister. There should be some hidden secrets in this." When Luo Ten heard this, there was approval in his eyes, and he felt a little better in his heart. As Musian said, this matter is full of doubts. Based on her understanding of Xiao Hua, he is not such a stingy person. After all, she had just seen Musian acting. If she hadn't happened to see Xiao Hua fainted when she came, and he still had the backlash characteristic of summoning the void nightmare, she would have only thought that it was Musian's strategy. Ye Qingxin looked at the two of them suspiciously, and couldn't help but narrow her long, narrow, and beautiful red eyes slightly, and then said quietly, "Since Mr. Mu said there are still many doubts about this matter, I guess there is already some evidence." Musian nodded slightly. To be honest, Miss Narcissus had talked about Brother Xiao before when she was looking for this junior. He glanced at Xiao Hua, who was unconscious, and continued, "I heard from Narcissus that Brother Xiao had the bones of the God King stolen from him when he was young. His spiritual consciousness was weak and it was difficult to make elixirs." Luo Ten raised her eyebrows slightly, a little surprised. "She even told you this? This is an unknown secret. Except for a few people, not many people know about this past event." Unexpectedly, Xiao Shuixian actually told Musian about this matter. Musian nodded slightly and continued, "Brother Xiao, whose spiritual consciousness is weak, refined 2 pills a few days ago. It stands to reason that he, with his weak spiritual consciousness, can hardly refine even the 3rd-grade pills, not to mention the 6th-grade pills. Miss Shuixian came to me these 2 days because of this matter and expressed her doubts." When these words came out, even Luo Ten couldn't help but narrow his eyes. She was a very wise empress, and naturally knew the meaning of Musian's words. She stared at this elegant gentleman with extraordinary temperament. "Do you suspect that Xiao Hua is not the real Xiao Hua?" "In fact, I heard about this from Miss Shuixian," Musian answered without humility. "If you put it this way, it's really a bit strange as you said, but at first, I just thought he got some immortal fate, so he strengthened his spiritual consciousness." Luo Tan's pleasant and crisp voice came faintly in the hall. At this moment, the Empress respected by the people of Yuzhou had a slight flicker in her eyes, and she had already doubted Xiao Hua. After Xiao Hua passed the tribulation that day, the maid came back to report that Xiao Hua's state at that time was a little strange, but she only thought that it was Xiao Hua's arrogance after breaking through the 8th level of soul refining, and did not care too much. But now thinking about it carefully, Xiao Hua's change is indeed a little bit wrong. In the previous fight with Bairu Oxi, she had never seen Xiao Hua use some secret methods before. After this matter, I will personally check his spiritual consciousness after he wakes up. If he is really possessed by someone, I owe a favor to friend Mu. Luo Tan spoke slowly. That day, I was injured, and I have not yet repaid the kindness of the senior for giving me the elixir. I dare not take credit, Musian said sincerely. As Musian said at the beginning, Xiao Hua did not need to die. The less Luo Tan trusted Xiao Hua, the less luck Xiao Hua would have, and the greater the benefit to Musian. That's enough. After Luo Tan ordered the maid to take the unconscious Xiao Hua away, Musian also remained silent and did not say anything more. I didn't expect that he would be possessed by someone else. Although I noticed that he seemed a little jealous in the past, he would not directly retaliate against others. Luo Tan sighed. Musian did not respond and maintained a respectful attitude. He did not know what Luo Tan's character was like. At this moment, he naturally could not follow his words and say bad things about Xiao Hua. If he said too much, he would make mistakes. He might cause the disgust of the Medicine King. After chatting with Luo Tan for a while, Musian stopped and said goodbye to the Medicine King with Wei Mengru. After today's incident, Luo Tan will definitely confirm Xiao Hua's true identity. For Musian, this is enough. After leaving the hall, Musian turned around and clasped his fists, saying, "Thank you, Senior Ye, for helping me this time." The cold wind was howling, and Ye Qingxin's black and red dress fluttered in the wind, clinging to her graceful body. She had a hint of appreciation in her red eyes, nodded slightly, and said, "You don't have to be so polite. I don't value these etiquettes." Although she said so, she liked Musian the more she looked at him. Compared to Yayu, Musian's humility and gentleness were even more precious, especially with the blessing of the natural furnace, which added a bit of charm that ordinary people did not have. "Your dioxin pill has not been refined yet. If you need me to activate the secret method to help, just tell me," Ye Qingxin said. "The last injury affected Senior's spiritual consciousness a little. I'd better refine this pill slowly by myself, so as not to hurt the origin of Senior's spiritual consciousness," Musian said sincerely. "After the Tiansheng furnace is upgraded, it will be able to nurture new spiritual consciousness. If possible, I hope to do my best for you," Musian continued, intentionally or unintentionally. Unlike Yayu, he is a good boy who only cares about Sister Ye, so he also hopes to help a little. "My dear friend Mu, you are thoughtful, but this may affect the heavenly spiritual energy in your Tiansheng furnace, so forget it." Ye Qingxin smiled brightly, but she was a little surprised and moved in her heart. After all, she and Musian were not related by blood, but the other party considered her everywhere, which she had never experienced in the past. "Even if the spiritual energy will be damaged, it is worth it for me," Musian smiled. "Then thank you in advance, my dear friend Mu." Ye Qingxin looked at Musian with her crystal clear red eyes, but the corners of her mouth inadvertently raised a faint arc. Seeing this, Musian was about to say goodbye to Ye Qingxin and leave with Wei Mengru. However, at this moment, he suddenly sensed a familiar breath in the distance. He looked up and saw the figure of a black-robed boy flying a sword and preparing to leave the sect. Although the distance was a bit far, Musian still recognized the other party's identity at a glance. "Yayu. After less than 2 days of rest, has the injury been fully recovered?" This Yayu, let alone other things, has learned the characteristics of the cockroach to survive thoroughly. As if he noticed the gazes of the three people, Yayu also turned his head to look over. Musian raised his hand and greeted Yayu with a smile, but in Yayu's view, this scene was more like a provocation to him. His dark eyes were full of coldness, and he looked at Musian with redness, his heart full of hatred and murderous intent. "You have obtained the fragment of the treasure map this time. I have already figured out the location of the cave for you. The important thing is to avoid unnecessary trouble. It is better to leave this place as soon as possible." In the ring, Yao Shan's face changed slightly when he saw this, and he immediately urged and reminded. Although he felt that it was impossible for Luo Tan to know that he was in Yayu's body now, there was no telling what the woman could do. Hearing this, Yayu quickly restrained the hatred in his heart. What he had to say this time was a blessing in disguise. Although he lost to Musian, after fighting against Musian, although he lost, he faced his inner demons. Yesterday, he survived a calamity. A fragment of the treasure map was obtained during the calamity. And that cave is exactly the place that the teacher knows. With this magical fate, his defeat this time is not a particularly difficult thing to accept. Only, when he saw the gorgeous ancestor and Musian walking together, Yayu's heart was still twisted, and his hatred became even more intense. Ancestor, she and Musian really came together. But fortunately, even Musian can't do anything to her. When I come back this time, they will definitely regret what they did in the past few days. Yayu no longer thought about it, and suddenly activated his flying sword, rushing directly towards the outside of Lianji sect. Musian's eyes flashed slightly, and he used his spiritual consciousness to activate the nightmare in the void, secretly following behind Yayu. Then, he sighed softly and said, "Brother Ye seems to be very hostile to me. It seems that it will be difficult for me to resolve it with him." Hearing this, Ye Qingxin shook her head and sighed, "You don't need to go out of your way to befriend him, just be yourself and be yourself." There was some conflict in her heart. Yayu did not respect his ancestors, but he was still a descendant of the Ye family. But Musian not only promised to help her find the Lord of Heaven in the future and help her family ascend, but he even immediately became concerned about her issues during this natural furnace advancement. This feeling can no longer be measured by interests. Although he is not a descendant of the Ye family, it is enough to move people. However, Musian's feelings were somewhat mixed with some purpose. And she knew some of Musian's thoughts. If Musian didn't have a Taoist companion, she could really consider it. After all, Musian has a deep connection with heaven, has a natural furnace that can continuously evolve, and knows how to make people happy. After joining the Tao, it is very boring, so it would be nice to use this to add some fun. But Musian was Qing Emperor's Taoist companion. If something really happened with him, wouldn't he be sorry to Qing Emperor? Let's observe and observe after this. Although he is eye-catching both in terms of his natural talent and his personal charm, it is not enough to really make her attracted. Luo Tan will definitely investigate what happened today, so just wait for her news. If you need help later, you can come directly to see me. Ye Qingxin quickly calmed down her inner thoughts, and after a brief explanation, she left the place. "Thank you, Senior." Musian thanked her sincerely, and then looked away after watching her leave. "Let's go, Sister Mengru." Musian turned to look at Wei Mengru beside him and said softly. It was winter, but the maid's clothes were a little thin, but because of the God-refining realm, she was not afraid of the cold. Although it cannot be said to have great ambitions, it is actually not small in scale. The gorgeous and complicated yellow skirt is tied with a thin ribbon, which outlines the graceful waist of the water snake. The cold wind blows the messy hair, but it adds a bit of laziness. "You also have thoughts about Ye Qingxin, right? Aren't you afraid of being discovered by Emperor Qing?" Wei Mengru said lightly, seeing through the young master's thoughts at a glance. If there is a rank in Gongdu, then Sister Qingdi must be the king. If she were to notice, Musian would probably have to go to Yaokai for a year and a half, working with vines every day, waiting for Yao day and night. Dream of pampering. I only treat Sister Ye as a senior. "What is Sister Mengru talking about?" Musian said helplessly. "Oh." Wei Mengru gave him a sneer, "You know best. I can't believe anything you say." Musian looked at this cold and arrogant delicate face, and deliberately came close to her ear. Next to the maid's crystal clear ear, he said in a very soft voice, "My favorite person is Sister Mengru, do you believe it?" Wei Mengru's delicate body suddenly stiffened, her beautiful eyes flickered, and a small burst of joy arose in her heart. Soon, her fair and flawless face was stained with an intoxicating blush. She fluttered her curled eyelashes, but forced herself to glance at him calmly and said coldly, "I don't believe it." Musian stared at her, his eyes full of tenderness. Wei Mengru turned her face away in panic. She was obviously still mocking Musian at first, but now she suddenly felt a little flustered. Let's go back first. This is not the place to talk. She raised her hand to summon the flying sword and remained as cold as possible. But if you look closely, you will find that the cold temperament of the past has melted a lot. That's right, Musian said with a smile. There are 2 chosen sons at the moment. Although he doesn't care about it, he still needs to prepare some plans for the future. Although I don't know where Yeyu has gone, the Void Nightmare is secretly following him. I hope the treasure hunter won't disappoint me. The corner of Musian's mouth couldn't help but curl up with a slight arc. He stepped on the flying sword and was about to leave this place with Wei Mengru in his arms. However, at this moment, he suddenly sensed a familiar breath coming from afar, which pulled Musian back to reality from his previous leisure. He looked up and saw a woman in a moon-white dress coming towards him. Senior sister! Musian shouted almost subconsciously, watching Lan Mulian lightly land in front of him. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 353. Under the Sky. The beautiful girl in a white dress floated down from the sky. Musian's face went from surprise to gradually stiff. He could vaguely smell the special fragrance of Lan Mulian. Oh my god, why did senior sister come here at this time? Musian's heart was pounding, and he felt something was wrong. And the fragrance on her body. Did senior sister use the ointment I gave her? He had just coaxed Sister Mengru and was planning to fly back with her. On the way, he would make an appointment to appreciate the plum blossoms in winter. As a result, he ran into senior sister who had just confessed to him yesterday. Although I have my own set of time management, it's all done according to plan. Is senior sister going to teach me how to make a mistake? Musian tried to stay calm and stood between Wei Mengru and Lan Mulian as much as possible to prevent her from noticing the fragrance of senior sister. Sister, why are you here? Then, he forced a smile on his face. Although his face was a little pale, this pale face could just cover up the slight panic on Musian's face. If Sister Mengru knew that I gave the ointment to senior sister, she would probably not be able to sleep well tonight. She might find that her dog head had been made into a bench when she woke up. While speaking, he quietly loosened his hands around Wei Mengru's slender waist and kept a certain distance. The Green Emperor said that you were attacked when you returned to Tianhe Garden today. As a senior sister of the sect, if a disciple was attacked by someone, I should naturally investigate it clearly. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone dare to attack my sect disciples in the future? Lan Mulian looked at Musian's little movements coldly, with teasing and anger in her beautiful eyes as clear as a cold pond. But from the looks of it, my brother the pastor still has the leisure to flirt with my junior sister, so I think he's not seriously injured. Senior sister, you're joking. With your physique, you should be able to see the disorder of my spiritual energy. Otherwise, I wouldn't need to rely on Sister Mengru to take me back. Musian sighed helplessly, pointing to the cauldron in his body. In order to put on a good show, he had made the Void Nightmare use more than 50% of his strength to attack him. Although he has recovered a lot with the help of elixirs, the disordered spiritual energy in his body still needs a day or two to be properly adjusted. But I didn't expect that Sister Kingdi would even notify senior sister to come over. It was really surprising. Lan Mulian's beautiful eyes seemed to be stained with the brilliant colors of the stars. She looked at Musian's body and confirmed his condition through the special physique of the holy body of destiny. After a while, she stared at Musian with her bright eyes and nodded, saying, I have recovered a lot. I should be able to recover in 2 days if I take good care of myself. Do you know who attacked you? Musian nodded gently, then shook his head quickly. Although the identity of the suspect has been locked, Senior Medicine King of Yuzhou has said that he will investigate the matter personally, so please rest assured, senior sister. Lan Mulian's beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and she naturally knew the meaning of his words. It's related to the people of Yuzhou, so Senior Yehuang personally started investigating. The saint of Yuzhou fought with me a few days ago, and she is still recovering after using secret methods. If you say that you have sinned against the people of Yuzhou in the past few days, you have also had contact with Xiao Shuixian, the daughter of heaven in Yuzhou, in the past 2 days, but you gave her elixirs yesterday, and they have a very good relationship. Is this matter related to Xiao Hua? Senior sister is good at everything but too smart. If you don't have a brain when you are with her, your future will definitely be arranged clearly. Musian was shocked in his heart, but still forced to be calm. It is almost exactly the same as senior sister's guess. Then he asked again, Senior sister, how did you know that Miss Xiao visited Tianhe Garden 2 days ago? Based on senior sister's personality, she should not be a stalker. Musian thought for a moment and said, is there a spy of senior sister in the sect? Lan Mulian glanced at him and smiled calmly. During the recent Ascension conference, all the leaders are on guard against outsiders to avoid unnecessary trouble. The disciples of the Law Enforcement Hall saw you and Xiao Shuixian coming out together yesterday. Senior sister is very smart and hard-working. You have to attend the Ascension conference and deal with these things, Musian praised. Lan Murian didn't care about Musian's praise. She said in a pleasant and cold voice. Since the Medicine Emperor is personally investigating this matter, we can rest assured. However, I also need to understand the matter in detail, so that I can explain the ins and outs of this matter to the Law Enforcement Hall and take more precautions to avoid similar situations. Except for a conceited person like Xiao Hua, no one should dare to attack people in the Lianji section. Musian said, this is as it should be. In order to understand this matter, I will visit Tianhe Garden tonight. Will you be busy tonight? Visit late at night? Musian looked at Lan Murian in surprise. Sister, there will be a competition later. Don't you need to practice hard and prepare for the next competition of the Ascension Conference? Musian refused tactfully. Lan Mulian explained seriously, junior brother's matter is equally important, and there will be no competition for me tomorrow, so it's okay. The problem is that if you come, everything will be under your eyes. How can I practice dual cultivation tonight? Although Musian was helpless, he wanted to separate Wei Mengru and Lan Mulian as soon as possible, so he nodded in agreement. In this case, then trouble senior sister. Lan Mulian nodded with satisfaction, smiled and took out a box of pills and handed it to Musian. This pill can speed up junior brother's adjustment of the disordered spiritual energy in his body. When he said this, he inadvertently glanced at the yellow-skirted maid behind Musian. Although the senior sister looked cold and aloof like an iceberg beauty, she was actually very gentle. Musian felt much more comforted and accepted the pill. Then he saw Lan Mulian take out a box of spices with a faint fragrance from her wide sleeves. Senior sister, what is this? Lan Mulian smiled brightly, but her tone was cold, and she said, spices can conceal the fragrance on your body. You just hugged and embraced junior sister Wei. If you go back and senior Kingdi smells it, it will be bad. For junior brother, this is a good thing. When did the senior sister start peeping at it? Musian's eyes became dull. At this time, Wei Mengru's eyes flashed slightly, and she inadvertently glanced at the dignified and elegant senior sister Lan, and sniffed lightly. She couldn't help but frown slightly, and glanced at the young master in front of her, as if she understood something, and her eyes gradually became cold. Het! He sneered in his heart, as if everything was clear. Senior sister is good in everything, she is kind-hearted and has a good figure, and she is a small rich woman, but it's a pity that she is too smart. It is not necessarily a good thing for a woman to be too smart, it would be great if she could be like Miss Ling Long. But fortunately, Sister Mengru did not seem to notice the meaning of senior sister's words, which was one of the few comforts in Musian's heart. In the evening, Musian dragged his tired body back to Tianhe Garden. The other garden was quiet. Byruoxi seemed to feel a sense of crisis because of Lan Murian. He was meditating and practicing in the house. He could feel the spiritual fluctuations after the purification of the heavenly Dao Qi from a distance. After entering the room, Musian took a willing pill given by Lan Murian and used the pill to regulate his body. After nearly half an hour, the effect of the pill was completely over, but Musian did not open his eyes. Instead, the spiritual energy pulled the cauldron and the master-slave contract to confirm the current location of the void nightmare. I knew Yayu had gained some new immortal fate. It was right to let void nightmare follow Yayu before. But the direction Yayu is going seems to be heading to the border between the North Continent Demon Realm and the East Continent. Could there be some ancient relics there? Musian's eyes were full of thought, recalling whether there were any unknown legends at the border between the Demon Realm and the East Continent. I still have to ask Sister Kingdi later, she should know these things better than me. After all, the past is long-lasting, and she knows many legends that are not recorded in ancient books. But the heavenly Dao really protects Yayu. Just after he lost to me, the heavenly Dao immediately arranged an immortal fate for Yayu in the dark, allowing him to improve his strength. If I hadn't awakened the memory of my previous life, even if I defeated Yayu this time, he might have come back for revenge next time, and staged a drama of "Don't bully the poor young man." But now Yekingzin no longer trusts Yayu, and the old man in Yayu's body is also being hunted by Luotan, so he can't dare to reveal his identity. To me, Yayu is not a big threat. Thinking of this, Musian immediately restrained his spiritual consciousness and slowly opened his eyes. Although he was here, he was able to share vision with the void nightmare and detect Yayu's location at this time. If it weren't for the fact that the void nightmare needed to use dreams as a sacrifice and was difficult for ordinary people to control, it would really have no shortcomings. Thinking about this, Musian suddenly realized that Wei Mengru, who was protecting him, was looking at him with cold eyes. He looked over and saw the cold and mature yellow-skirted maid standing quietly in the shadow. Her hair set off her dignified and delicate face, revealing a bit of cold and awe-inspiring beauty. Musian couldn't help but waved at her. "What are you doing? Sister Mengru is so tired of standing all the time. Come here, come and sit down." Musian smiled. Wei Mengru maintained a cold and reserved demeanor, but her beautiful eyes were even colder than usual, and she glanced at him quietly. Seeing Musian showing a bright smile and waving at him again, she sat down on the bed beside him without making a sound, but her obviously displeased and cold temperament made Musian vaguely feel that something was wrong. Sister Mengru was angry, but I didn't seem to provoke her today. She was fine when I came just now. It should be related to the matter of senior sister. Musian's eyes flickered slightly, but his heart was as clear as a mirror. He said calmly, "If nothing unexpected happens, I should be away for 2 days after this." Wei Mengru seemed to have recovered from her unpleasant mood just now, and seemed to want to turn her head to look at him, but because of face, she only moved her jade neck slightly, but did not turn her head, and said, "Do you want to go to the cave where Yayu went?" If she was dissatisfied with Musian's gift of Lan Murian perfume at the beginning, then now after hearing that Musian was going to leave for a few days, Wei Mengru felt more reluctant. But she was shy and couldn't say that she wanted to go with him. "My physique is special. If I leave you, it may be noticed by the way of heaven." Wei Mengru looked forward with a cold tone. Musian's physique is special and can shield the secrets of heaven. This is why Wei Mengru will not have bad luck when she follows Musian. You now have a bronze piece to suppress bad luck. If you only leave for 2 or 3 days, there will be no problem, Musian said. In fact, he didn't really have to set off within the next 2 days. Once Yayu, the treasure hunting rat, found the location of the ruins, it would still be in time for him to ask the Void Nightmare to lead the way. It's just that now he wants to see why Wei Mengru is angry today. Although he has already guessed it. It should be that Sister Mengru smelled the ointment applied on senior sister's body. Hearing Musian's refusal, Wei Mengru couldn't help but raise her eyebrows slightly, and finally couldn't help looking at him. She felt empty in her heart, as if she was lost in the wilderness, and her voice was low. You just want to be alone, so as not to be disturbed by others when you are intimate with other women. In the past, she had always been by Musian's side, but at that time she was just a maid, and would not interfere with her young master's flirting. At best, when Musian was intimate with other girls, she would give him a contemptuous look to express her disdain for the philandering master. Then she left without looking back. But now her relationship with Musian is in an intimate and ambiguous state. Except for the last step, the two have done most of the rest. I just saw Lan Mulian and Musian's intimate conversation, and she even seemed to be using the ointment she gave to Musian. These things naturally made Wei Mengru feel jealous deep in her heart. If the original witch's consciousness was still in her body, she would probably transform into the witch of jealousy. If possible, I also want to go with Sister Mengru. After all, I am used to having you by my side. Musian took the opportunity to put his hand on Wei Mengru's beautiful legs, and the soft touch filled his palm. He moved up and held her soft little hand. Gently pinching the maid's soft little hand, Musian also covered the back of her hand with his other hand, and sighed softly. In fact, it is natural that you are angry today because of the ointment. Wei Mengru's delicate body was obviously stiff, and then she raised her beautiful eyes and said in surprise, "When did you find out that I knew about this?" Those beautiful eyes seemed to stare at Musian with resentment. Such a resentful look made Musian's heart ripple, and his heart beat faster. He stabilized his emotions and said helplessly, "In fact, when I went to see my senior sister that night, she was angry and talked about the ointment, so I took the opportunity to." "Why are you explaining this to a maid like me? I know your personality." In the past, Wei Mengru tried to stay calm and didn't want to pay attention to him. She even wanted to pull her hand out of his palm. Hearing this, Musian sighed helplessly. "Sister Mengru should know that I have never treated you as a maid. I have always treated you as my wife." Seeing Wei Mengru struggling a little, Musian not only refused to let go, but took the initiative to hold her hand tightly, letting her get closer to him. Until the end, as if she was afraid of affecting his injury, the maid's strength to break free gradually weakened, and finally let him hold her hand. "No matter how you explain it, it's actually my fault. Next time I go to Tianqian City, I will give you whatever Sister Mengru wants." Musian apologized sincerely. "As for now, whether you are angry or want to punish me, I have no opinion." Listening to the gentle words beside her ear, Wei Mengru was silent for a long time, as if thinking about what he had just said. And Musian was also silent, just holding the pair of soft hands, enjoying the warmth. After an unknown amount of time, Wei Mengru came back to her senses from the silence just now. She lowered her eyes and said coldly, "So, you think that even if I am angry about this, it is a matter of course?" Musian had already thought of the answer, and smiled. Of course, this is Sister Mengru's power. He was helping Wei Mengru correct her past wrong views. Now she is not completely a maid, so she naturally has the right to be dissatisfied. Looking at Wei Mengru, who suddenly became bright and beautiful, and her temperament seemed to be softened, Musian also breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Wei Mengru glanced at him faintly. "Actually, because it's you, I didn't feel strange even if I found out that you gave your perfume away just now." "Sister Mengru, don't you feel strange about us being together now?" Musian gently pinched her soft little hand and whispered in her ear. "Naturally, with your personality, no matter what you do, it's not strange." Wei Mengru glanced at Musian with contempt, but just to hide the shame deep in her heart. The room fell into a strange silence. Wei Mengru's soft eyes were a little shy. She noticed his obsessed eyes staring at her. Although she deliberately maintained a cold image, her little hand subconsciously grasped the quilt of the bed. Do you like white silk, or black silk? A pleasant voice as thin as a mosquito's hum suddenly came from the room. She glanced at Musian and quickly lowered her head. Musian was stunned for a moment. Even a fool would not find it difficult to understand the meaning of the maid's words, and he naturally knew the meaning of these words. Musian pondered for a moment and suggested seriously, I actually think mesh socks are pretty good, and you can play go on your legs. Oh, it's better to add a leg ring. Musian's voice disappeared in the room before he finished speaking. He looked at the cold face that was close to him at some point, and the charming and shy eyes that were raised, and his eyes couldn't help but be dazed. Yao Meng may have returned to Tian Heiwen. If she saw this scene, just think about the consequences. Musian naturally knew this truth. So he also knew what he should do now, which was the most correct and rational choice. Musian raised his hands, which had nowhere to put, and slowly put them around Wei Mengru's plump waist, moving slowly down along the waist and kissing the maid's soft lips. The most correct choice at this time is to make an irrational choice. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 354. That night, Wei Mengru curled up in the quilt and uttered a sweet and soft moan different from before. I don't know when her cool fingers embraced Musian. Although she maintained a cold attitude at the beginning, as Musian poured passion into her tonight, it seemed that no matter how cold and beautiful she was, her attitude would slowly melt away. Musian breathed a sigh of relief and looked down at the beauty in his arms. The quilt covered the scenery in the room. Although she buried her head, she could still vaguely see the faint blush on her charming face. I didn't expect that one day I would see Sister Mengru in this posture. Musian couldn't help but draw a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Thinking back to the scenes just now, he was a little eager for a while. Finally, I was shy with Sister Mengru. It was not easy. Although it was a bit risky tonight, it was worth taking any risk to see Wei Mengru's shy look. Before, he and Wei Mengru were always stuck at the last step, and Wei Mengru had always been a little reluctant to let go. Tonight, thanks to the ointment, they have reached this step, and there will be more opportunities for sex in the future. After all, there will be countless times if there is a first time. Think about the Kingdi's sister at the beginning, she was also reserved and cold, but now the fairy in the eyes of the world often takes the initiative when he is having sex at night. Even after reading the book The Way to Control Your Husband, which was written by someone unknown, he learned a lot of ways to play. Many of the ways to play are exactly what Musian likes, so much so that he once thought that the author wrote this book according to his XP. Although that book has taught Ruoxi some bad things, many interesting ways to play in it are indeed worth referring to. Let Sister Mengru refer to The Way to Control Your Husband more next time. Sister Mengru, it's almost time, I'll take you to take a medicinal bath, so as not to affect your competition tomorrow, Musian suddenly said. Although she is a cultivator, it is her first time, which will affect her physical condition to some extent. This level is nothing, there is no need for a medicinal bath. Wei Mengru's voice was still as cold as usual, but her delicate hand subconsciously hugged Musian tightly. Musian naturally noticed this subtle move, gently stroked her soft hair, and deliberately teased, Sister Mengru, are you reluctant to let me go? Then you think too highly of yourself, Wei Mengru snorted coldly, expressing her disdain. Musian didn't care, I'll go prepare a medicinal bath for you first. However, just when he lifted the quilt and was about to leave, Wei Mengru hugged him tighter, and her graceful figure pressed against his arms. Even Musian, who had already finished, couldn't help but feel a little moved. Can you stay with me, for a while? She suddenly whispered in an almost inaudible voice, her delicate face like ice and snow was stained with a drunken blush. She bit her lips subconsciously, but mustered up the courage to raise her moist eyes and stare at Musian. Musian was stunned for a moment. For a moment, his blood surged uncontrollably, and he almost couldn't restrain himself from doing it again. But after all, after a big battle, Musian's rationality finally overcame the impulse, covered the quilt again, and stayed intimate with Sister Mengro in the quilt for a while. I can see Sister Mengro's shyness. Even if I am caught by Yao Meng tonight, I will make a profit. Musian was full of joy in his heart. These few days were really one of the most comfortable days in his life. It deepened his feelings for Ye Qingxin, making Luo Tan suspicious of Xiao Hua. Although he lost to his senior sister, he also gained a wave of goodwill. More importantly, the maid who had accompanied him for countless days and nights in the past is now finally together as he wished. If there is only one regret, it is that the remaining few bronze fragments hanging on Wei Mengru's chest have not been found yet. If all the bronze fragments are collected, her body of doom will be completely broken. After a quarter of an hour, Wei Mengru gradually recovered from her previous state of shame, gently pressed down Musian's hand, got off the bed and silently changed her clothes. The long black hair like a waterfall fell naturally, slightly bent at the calf, and there seemed to be some fatigue on her flawless face like ice and snow. This is also a matter of course, who made Sister Mengru dress so shy yesterday, and she was wearing his favorite black and white silk. It's a pity that there is no leg ring. If you lightly tighten the flesh on the thigh, it will be a sure kill. I'll go with you, so that we can prepare the medicinal bath. Musian came behind her and put his hands on Wei Mengru's shoulders. No, no need, I can do it myself. Wei Mengru's delicate face, as delicate as ice and snow, could not help but be stained with two drunken blushes. She noticed the boy's chest pressed against her, turned back and glared at him, then ran and opened the door and left in a hurry. It seems that Sister Mengru has not recovered yet. But it is true. The more proactive she was tonight, the more ashamed she would be if she thought about it now. It is not an exaggeration to say that she was going to die in society. But although Sister Mengru was aloof, she had a really good temper. If it was Ruoxi who had awakened Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness and knew that he had given the ointment to someone else, it is estimated that Master Mu's dog head would be used as a bench tonight. Looking at Wei Mengru's leaving back, Musian withdrew his gaze and stopped while he was ahead. Although he was still thinking about teasing Wei Mengru before she came to her senses, he considered that if she reacted later and got angry, she might retaliate. Shouldn't I thank my sister for not disturbing you tonight? Musian was about to prepare some refreshments for his sister's arrival, when a familiar and gentle voice suddenly came from the house. The emerald green light gathered silently in the house. Yao Meng sat on a tea chair beside her with her hands on her cheeks, her hair resting on her shoulders, adding a bit of lazy fireworks. It's really interesting that the spiritual energy quenched by the natural furnace can suppress the bad luck in the body of the original witch. Musian didn't seem surprised by Yao Meng's sudden appearance. After all, he had even thought of it early, but the atmosphere was already in place at that time, so Musian simply made up his mind and rushed first. Can the spiritual energy in the natural furnace suppress bad luck? Musian asked in confusion. Wei Mengru's bad luck is related to the heavenly Dao of Zhu, and all the signs now indicate that she is suspected to be able to block the secrets of the heaven, but Musian is not sure why. After all, this is the first time I have seen a natural furnace that can continuously evolve. It is not surprising even if any changes occur. Yao Meng sat lazily on the chair, legs crossed, white jade flawless feet swaying under the green long skirt, and asked casually. You pretended to be attacked today, right? What grudge does Xiao Hua have against you? Musian shook his head and said, it's not a grudge, but the other party is jealous. He was jealous when he saw me chatting with his cousin. I just fought back. Yao Meng said softly, and continued, the Void Nightmare will help you because of the 8 Desolate Dream Map. She is worthy of being my wife, so smart, Musian nodded and said, the 8 desolate dream map can continuously weave beautiful dreams to become the food of the void nightmare. It was secretly used by Sister Lin Ling when it attacked me. I was threatened, so I surrendered and signed a master-servant contract with me. Sister, do you care so much about my attack? Yao Meng twisted her hair, twisted it with her fingers as if nothing had happened, and raised her eyes lazily. You died in front of me once in the past, so if someone finds trouble with you, I don't mind sending him off. That would be too cheap, not to mention that the Medicine King of Yuzhou is already investigating this matter in secret. If you take action to get rid of Xiao Hua now, it will cause hatred between you and her. There is no need. Musian smiled and said, if I really need help, I won't be polite to you, but you don't need to do it yourself now. Compared with Xiao Hua's affairs, you might as well study the matter of Nirvana silk. Nirvana silk. A trace of doubt flashed across Yao Meng's beautiful eyes. I know you traded a piece of Nirvana silk to Yao Yu to make stockings, and gave it to your maid. Do you have such a special liking for stockings? Musian nodded and said seriously, stockings are one of the greatest inventions of mankind. But I think Sister Kingdi is more suitable for black fishnet stockings, and it's best to add a pair of high heels, and if possible, a black short skirt made of Nirvana silk with leg rings. The whiter and more crystal clear the skin of a woman, the more beautiful she looks in a black dress. After all, the strong contrast between black and white will be very obvious, and Yao Meng, a fairy with inner charm, has skin that is already white and translucent, and has a faint glow. If she changes into such an attractive outfit, tisk tisk. Well, if possible, it's better to trap her with her own vines. Of course, Musian can't mention this now. Yao Meng must have heard the gentle and charming voice just now. Now that she was reminded of the vine, Musian felt that he didn't know if he could leave the room. Yao Meng stopped stirring her hair with her slender fingers, and a faint arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. In fact, I think I can add a blindfold and a ball that can block my mouth, and use my pure world seed that can quickly grow into vines to bind my body. Her eyes flashed with a gleam of joy. What do you think? Musian was shocked. Where did you learn these strange terms and ways of playing? Back then, Fairy Yao Meng was still a synonym for holiness and nobility in people's eyes, and even Yao Meng at that time didn't understand these things at all. How long have you been in his Tiansheng Dinglu? He actually knows how to play so well. Yao Meng looked at him with a smile in her eyes. I borrowed a book from someone a few days ago. There are some interesting contents on it. I guess you must like it? What do you mean by like? It's just the appreciation of beauty. Look at the Medicine King of Yuzhou, isn't he wearing black stockings? But most of our Dongzhou cultivators have no idea about stockings. After a while, I will make this kind of dress popular in Dongzhou, Musian said righteously. Het. Yao Meng chuckled, raised her snow-white chin, and said faintly, don't forget, my way can make it extremely difficult for others to refuse my request, and I can also detect the desires of others. What are you thinking and what are your desires? I know better than others. Musian shook his head reservedly. I think it is difficult for most people to have no thoughts when facing my sister. Except for you, who dares to have such disrespectful thoughts? Yao Meng's gorgeous blue eyes revealed a faint smile. Most people don't even dare to look up at me, and only you have the idea of blasphemy. The power of the Hedeo realm is like blood suppression for cultivators. Most, or even all, cultivators would not dare to offend the Empress of the Hedeo realm. This is due to the awe of the cultivators themselves for the mighty Hedeo, which cannot be erased. Therefore, in Ye Qingxin's cave test that day, only Musian had the illusion of color, and even Ye Qingxin, the examiner, was not spared. Musian smiled and said, in fact, I was very respectful to my sister at the beginning. When he said this, he couldn't help but look at the fairy in front of him a few more times, wondering. By the way, has my sister's cultivation improved? Why do I feel that the fluorescence on your skin is more charming than before? You even painted your nails. Yao Meng pursed her lips, with a faint smile on her face, a flawless and beautiful face, long hair, and a graceful and sexy body wrapped in a green dress. Under the skirt, there is a pair of beautiful legs as slender as white jade, bare feet, white and clean, as if soaked in milk, slightly curled toes are exquisite and beautiful, nail polish is a light pink like jelly, and the silver glow of moonlight adds a layer of sacred luster to it. Yao Meng's green eyes reveal a teasing smile. You have been staring at other people's feet since just now, do you want to lick them? As soon as she opened her mouth, she turned from a fairy into a little devil who plays with people's hearts. Musian pondered for a moment and smiled. Senior sister is coming to see me tonight, let's find a time another day. Even Yao Meng's eyes were a little more uncomfortable and shy, and she changed the subject lightly. The Medicine Emperor will not protect those around him, not to mention that Xiao Hua is just one of the people she saved casually in the past, but the premise is that Xiao Hua has done something bad. But she knows that today's Void Nightmare may be a play you summoned to perform. Are you sure she will fall into the trap? I didn't expect that Sister Kingdi also had an embarrassed side. I thought she had no weaknesses. Musian smiled secretly and said, with the Medicine Emperor, an old, senior who has lived in the world for tens of thousands of years, he can naturally know the clues of today's events. I almost forgot that the Sister Kingdi in front of me is also a female emperor for tens of thousands of years. I almost AOE. Sensing Yao Meng's kind eyes with a smile, Musian continued, didn't Sister Kingdi find all the suspicious points about Xiao Hua today? He pretended to be unconscious, which indirectly admitted that he was the one who ordered the Void Nightmare to attack me. Why do you think he would make himself unconscious and hide his spiritual consciousness at all costs? Yao Meng narrowed his eyes. There is something wrong with his spiritual consciousness, so he dare not expose it in front of the Medicine Emperor, for fear of being discovered abnormal. At first I was not completely sure, but after Xiao Shuixian said that his cousin could refine the 6th grade elixir, it was basically certain. Musian said lightly, in the world of cultivating immortals, the evil act of taking over other people's bodies, I think Senior Medicine Emperor will not let it go. To put it another way, even if Xiao Hua really has some means to deceive Luo Tan, it doesn't matter. After this incident, there will inevitably be a rift between the two. And as long as there is the sense of distrust, he will naturally be able to take advantage of it. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 355. Xiao Hua felt as if he was in a dark world and was falling continuously. His face was pale, but his heart was full of surprise. Even the tension that Luo Tan had noticed because of the attack on Musian was washed away by the surprise at this moment. Although he had already known that the fragment of the treasure map could store other people's spiritual consciousness when he obtained it during the Thunder Tribulation, he still did not expect that there was a hidden cave in the fragment. Now that his spiritual consciousness has entered this world, there are still some traces of spiritual consciousness left in his body, and the aura of the Void Nightmare is also still left on his body. When he thought of this, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly sank. If he leaves this place now and lets his spiritual consciousness return to his body, Luo Tan will definitely find that Xiao Hua is no longer the original Xiao Hua as long as he scans his spiritual consciousness. Until then, there will be no explanation from his side. Originally, he wanted to get along with the Empress for a few years, and wait until the two of them became familiar with each other. By then, it would not matter even if Luo Tan realized that he was no longer the original Xiao Hua. After all, their relationship had deepened a lot by that time, and Luo Tan would probably miss their old relationship. And if it is discovered that he has occupied Xiao Hua's body now, I'm afraid. When he thought of this, Xiao Hua felt a burst of despair in his heart. Although I am out of danger for the time being, Luo Tan will definitely doubt my identity now, once she confirms that I am not the real Xiao Hua, but a time traveler. How will she deal with me? For Luo Tan, he is probably equivalent to taking away Xiao Hua's body. By that time, it will definitely be a dead end. What should we do? After finally getting this chance to live a new life, we must not die like this. Xiao Hua clenched his fists, and the flame of hope was burning in his heart. At this moment, the Providence in the dark seemed to hear the unwilling roar in his heart. Vaguely, Xiao Hua seemed to see a faint white light gradually emerging in front of him. This is... Xiao Hua's eyes condensed slightly, and then a hint of joy appeared in his eyes. The treasure map itself is actually a magic weapon that can disguise spiritual consciousness. Although it is just a broken piece, you must know that Luo Tan, who is currently in the Lianji sect, is not the real person, so it is difficult to see the disguise of this magic weapon. As long as you get through this level first, everything will be easy. Xiao Hua's eyes gradually lit up with an unprecedented glimmer of hope, and he raised his hand to grab the light without hesitation. The cold winter wind is howling, and in a certain cabin, candlelight adds a bit of warmth to this winter night. Speaking of which, does sister know if there are any relics of ancient power at the junction of the northern part of Yaokai Holy Land and the demon world? Muzian sat next to Yao Meng, and his right hand caressed the fairy's small and delicate jade feet intentionally or unintentionally. His palm gradually moved upward, feeling the cool and soft touch like white jade. Yao Meng's silky hair fell on her lightly blushing face. She raised her eyes and looked at Muzian quietly and said, "Can you take your hands away first? Or are you not worried about being discovered by your Taoist companion?" No matter how much he teased Muzian, being teased so unscrupulously still made the Qing Emperor seem a little embarrassed. "It's cold, I'm just helping Sister Qingdi warm up, nothing else." Muzian generously stretched out his hand to hold her in his arms and said seriously, "Besides, Ruoxi has a competition in a few days and is meditating. Sister, you don't have to worry about her image being damaged." Yao Meng's delicate body gradually warmed up, and she was obviously emotional. "Be serious." Although she has always maintained the image of a big sister in front of Muzian, she is more accustomed to taking the initiative rather than being the passive one. To put it bluntly, she can be unscrupulous when taking the initiative to tease someone, but she is not used to it when being teased instead. Yao Meng struggled symbolically in Muzian's arms, then slowly softened into his arms. Although she was a little embarrassed by Muzian's random right hand, she was also looking forward to it. Okay, listen to Sister Fairy," Muzian replied with a smile, but he seemed very obedient. Of course, that's just words. After all, Yao Meng is still a fairy in the eyes of the world. Even though he has awakened a special hobby now, he has no experience in the relationship between men and women. Naturally, he will not even react shyly when being teased by Muzian. But in fact, from the time when she confirmed her relationship with Yao Meng to now, she has kissed and hugged her several times, and she is an everlasting empress, so logically she should get used to it. Thinking of this, Muzian couldn't help but sigh in his heart, "There are not many girls left for me. In my impression, the only one younger than him is Qian'er. Even Sister Lingxian had a past life as a reincarnated queen. Damn it, why do I feel like I'm always driving a big car with whomever I'm looking for?" Muzian sighed secretly and felt the soft feel of Sister Qingdi's beautiful white legs. Seeing that Muzian was unable to make any progress, Yao Meng stopped stopping him and instead mentioned what Muzian had just asked. The junction between Dongzhou and the demon realm is actually also called the Land of Chaos. If there are any relics there, it is probably the first immortal who visited this place in the early days of chaos. Is the immortal also the first monk to ascend to the immortal stage? Muzian was a little surprised to hear the word immortal again. He didn't expect that Yayu, the treasure hunting rat, would have such a strong luck and could find such a relic. Yayu must have something like a treasure map, otherwise he wouldn't have been in such a hurry to go there. Yao Meng nodded slightly. There was a rumor before that there was something left by the immortal in the Land of Chaos, and that thing was related to the heaven. At this point, Yao Meng seemed to remember something and reminded him intentionally or unintentionally, the road to becoming an immortal is now revealed. Although I don't have much idea about the heaven, Zhu has been clear on the surface recently, but in fact, there are undercurrents. Now many people are secretly deducing the next location of the road to becoming an immortal. Although these things have nothing to do with you, there will always be people who will take advantage of the chaos to do something, and you must also know how to protect yourself. Musian's natural furnace contains the spiritual energy of the heaven. Not many people know about this, but anyone who knows about it will definitely be interested in him. It is impossible for her to secretly protect Musian all the time. There will always be times when Yaokai Holy Land needs her to worry about it. This is also a reminder for Musian not to relax. Musian nodded seriously. By the way, Fairy Sister is not interested in becoming an immortal. Yao Meng said calmly, no matter who it is, they will be interested in becoming an immortal, but it depends more on the opportunity. It is useless to think about it before the time comes. Besides, now that you are in Zhu, I am worried about leaving you alone to ascend. Musian was moved, untied the thin ribbon, and took the opportunity to reach in, hugged her thin waist and gently kneaded it twice. If the natural furnace grows again in the future, I will find a way to help you become an immortal. Even such a fairy who does not care about worldly fireworks can't help but feel slightly hot on her pretty face, and glared at him. If you do this again, even I will be angry. With our relationship, Sister Kingdi is willing to punish me? And didn't you attack me several nights before? Now I take the initiative once, isn't it okay? Musian said innocently. I feel that Sister Kingdi is unusually attractive tonight. If it weren't for Senior Sister coming tonight to learn the details of today's attack, he would have wanted to unlock some new ways of playing with Yao Meng, or even play some more deluxe collector's edition games. Yao Meng glanced at Musian, but it should be said that she is worthy of being a beauty. Even such a look is fascinating. Why don't we play for a while now? Bang! Musian was just thinking about this when he suddenly heard the fluctuation of the formation. He looked up and glanced outside the closed door, feeling a little regretful. It seems that tonight is not suitable to try to play some indescribable new modes with Sister Kingdi, and it can only be left for a few days. After saying goodbye to Yao Meng for the time being, Musian left the room, and soon saw Lan Mulian, who was just in front of the villa. Musian looked up and smiled. Sister, why did you come so late? Did something happen on the way? Lan Mulian glanced at him lightly. Just give you some time to spend with Junior Sister Wei. It seems that Junior Brother should have finished his work. Being too smart is not cute, Senior Sister. Musian used a smile to hide his helplessness and said, anyway, come in and sit down first, Senior Sister. Lan Mulian shook her head and said, it would be bad if the late-night visit disturbed the meditation of the two junior sisters. Let's relax outside and chat by the way. Musian hummed, but did not refuse, and followed Lan Mulian to leave the villa. It was late at night, and the two walked on the path of the glazed palace, and the plum blossoms swayed in the cold wind. Musian decided to get straight to the point and said, actually, if Senior Sister's visit tonight is because of my attack, I have something I want to ask you for a favor. Lan Mulian's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of doubt, staring at Musian. I hope that Senior Sister can explain to the law enforcement hall that I personally do not want to be held accountable for the attack on me, so that this matter can be resolved before the storm arises. As if he noticed Lan Mulian's puzzled gaze on him, Musian smiled and continued, I know Senior Sister has a lot of questions to ask, but please believe me. He naturally had his own purpose for doing this. Lan Mulian glanced at Musian with a cold look in her eyes and said, only a few people know that you were attacked. If you want to hide it, you can hide it, but what do you want to do? With your personality, you should be vindictive, she continued. Musian pondered for a moment and said, the Holy Sun brought by Yuzhou attacked the disciples of Lianji section. This matter can be minimized, but it can also be made into a big deal. If it is investigated, the sect will probably keep Xiaohua, right? But if so, there will inevitably be some gossip in Yuzhou. No matter what is done, there will always be someone who will use this to cause trouble. Neither the sect nor the Medicine King Senior wants to see this scene. So you have to wrong yourself. Lan Murian frowned slightly. Then, she quickly shook her head and said, "No, you are not that kind of person. Do you want Luo Tan to owe you a favor?" "My senior sister knows me." Musian nodded slightly. "The alchemy skills of the Medicine King Senior are at the top of the 9 provinces. Many elixirs can only be refined by her hands. This favor will be of great use in the future. It is enough to hand Xiaohua over to Yuzhou for punishment. After all, after this incident, Luo Tan will definitely not trust Xiaohua at all." For Musian, his goal has been achieved. Lan Mulian was silent for a while, and finally nodded silently. "Since junior brother has his own ideas, let's do it." "Thank you, senior sister." Musian had a smile in his eyes, and everything was going on in an orderly manner according to the plan. Tomorrow, if he goes to Luo Tan for another favor, Ruoxi will have a chance to evolve the Tegzudan of the 9-tailed fox. Gong Lianyu's spiritual consciousness in the Hedeo realm, coupled with the strong spiritual energy of the 9-tailed fox, the future Ruoxi may be the first person in history to cultivate both demon cultivators and human cultivators to the extreme. The most important thing is, that's a fox-eared girl. "Don't you blame me?" Lan Mulian hesitated for a moment, and suddenly asked softly. The cold and pleasant voice also pulled Musian back to reality from his thoughts. "She is as cold and beautiful as the snow in winter, noble and beautiful. If you ignore her tall and sexy figure, you will only think that the senior sister is as cold as frost and snow, spotless." But it was this kind of woman who had made an intimate move in front of the arena that shocked all the disciples. That was also a response to Ruoxi and others. "I'm afraid that I've caused you a lot of trouble by making such an intimate move in front of the arena," Lan Mulian asked. Musian sighed lightly, but did not respond. Instead, he reached out and held Lan Mulian's slightly cold hand. She subconsciously wanted to retract her hand, but Musian held it tightly, not giving her any chance to break free. In this Kyushu where the protagonists are rampant, Lan Mulian is currently the only girl of heaven who has no blessing but always walks in front of her peers. Musian never doubted the talent of his senior sister, and even felt that even if she was not a reincarnation of the Dao, she would be able to achieve the Dao sooner or later in the future. From Tianqian City to now, he has actually been ambiguous with Lan Mulian several times, but he has never done anything that crosses the line, because he knows the arrogant character of this beautiful and refined senior sister. You can't be too proactive, but you can't completely stop pursuing. You have to know how to grasp a degree. You can pursue, but you can't lick. After all, just like Heba, the more you lick a woman's heart, the harder it gets. And now is the right time to pursue. Senior sister is so beautiful. Musian gently pinched Lan Murian's soft little hand and stared at her face hidden under the veil. Although it didn't look real, it added a bit of hazy charm. Lan Murian had nowhere to hide, a trace of panic flashed in her eyes, and her pretty face gradually became hot. However, she forced herself to calm down, raised her beautiful eyes as clear as a cold pond, and teased lightly, "Junior brother said this to several girls." Musian did not answer, but just sighed lightly. "Senior sister just asked me if I blamed you for your intimate behavior towards me on the martial arts stage, right? If you say you don't blame me, it's all fake. I even thought about taking revenge on you." Lan Murian was stunned for a moment. No matter how mature and stable her mind was, it was difficult for her to come back to her senses when she heard Musian's words at this moment. Then, there came a slight pain deep in her heart. Her long and curled eyelashes trembled slightly, but her beautiful eyes were full of complexity, and she lowered her eyelids slightly. Silence filled the space between the two, with only the whistling of the cold wind. After a long silence, Lan Murian lowered her eyelids slightly, subconsciously trying to break free from Musian's hand. At this time, Musian suddenly raised his hand and gently lifted her veil. In the dim light, the breathtakingly beautiful face appeared in the field of vision, and it was amazing at first sight. Then, she suddenly felt a slight warm breath gently on her cheek. Lan Murian raised her eyelids slightly, her beautiful eyes were full of calmness, but hidden under this calmness was a kind of sadness different from the past. "Junior brother, do you have anything else to do?" she asked softly. She could actually break free from Musian's hand and leave now, but she felt a little reluctant in her heart. For some reason, she wanted to hear what Musian had to say. Musian reached out and hugged Lan Murian's slender waist, staring at her, and whispered, "In fact, I was more happy later. But even so, I still want to take revenge on my senior sister." Lan Murian's beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and she raised her head and was about to speak. At this time, Musian slowly lowered his head, kissed his senior sister on the right cheek, and smiled, "In this way, we are even."